Tonight, we leave behind the modern world and step into a mythic past. A world shaped not by science or reason, but by gods, giants, and ancient whispers carried on the cold northern wind. This was a world where thunder wasn't just weather, it was Thor's hammer crashing across the sky, where death was not an end, but a passage to Valhalla or the shadowy depths of Helheim. A world where every tree, every river, every stone held meaning, mystery, and magic. Long before the age of empires and electricity, the Norse people carved their beliefs into stone, told their tales in firelit halls, and placed their faith in gods who were fierce, flawed, and deeply human. These weren't distant deities. They bled. They wept. They feasted. They died. Tonight, we'll trace the entire arc of Norse mythology, from the chaotic birth of the cosmos to the final battle at Ragnarok, and even the world that rises from its ashes. We'll meet gods like Odin, who gave an eye for wisdom, Loki, whose clever tongue brought both wonder and ruin, and Freyja, whose beauty stirred love and war alike. But beyond the gods, we'll uncover the daily beliefs of the Norse, how they viewed fate, magic, honor, and death. These stories were more than entertainment. They were survival. They were identity. So settle in. Let the sagas flow like mead. Let the old runes speak once more. This is the entire story of Norse mythology. Welcome to the journey.
The origins of the cosmos. Ginnungagap, Niflheim, and Muspelheim. In the beginning, there was no earth, no sea, no sky. There was no sand, nor grass, nor cool waves. There was only the Ginnungagap, the yawning gap, or the deceiving void. Picture it not as a sterile vacuum, but as a vast, silent, and magical space of pure potential, stretching between two opposing realms of elemental power. It was the cosmic womb, waiting for the spark that would trigger creation. To one side of this void lay Niflheim, the realm of fog and mist. It was a place of unimaginable cold, an endless expanse of darkness, ice, and frost. From its heart churned the great spring, Hvergelmir, the roaring cauldron, from which flowed 11 mighty rivers known collectively as the Elivagar, the ice waves. These were not rivers of water, but of primal, venomous ice. As they flowed out from their source and away from the frigid heart of Niflheim, they poured into the northern reaches of the Ginnungagap. There, the immense cold caused the venom within the water to harden into layers of rime and frost, building up like vast, silent glaciers in the emptiness. The northern part of the void was a domain of crushing weight, stillness, and a cold so absolute it was a tangible force. This was the primordial element of ice, a force of stasis and contraction. To the opposite side of the void, in the south, lay a realm that was the utter antithesis of Niflheim. This was Muspelheim, the land of fire. Muspelheim was a searing, blindingly bright world of eternal flame, molten rock and soot. It was a place of untamable energy, ceaseless motion, and unbearable heat. Nothing from any other realm could survive there. Its borders were guarded by a colossal being, the fire giant Surtur. He stood as an eternal sentinel, wielding a flaming sword that burned brighter and hotter than the sun. Surtur was not simply a guardian. He was an embodiment of Muspelheim's destructive purpose. He existed from the beginning and the prophecies foretold that he would remain until the very end, when he would emerge from his realm to burn the world and slay the gods. This was the primordial element of fire, a force of chaos and expansion. For untold ages, these two realms existed in a state of suspended opposition, separated by the immense Ginnungagap. Niflheim endlessly pushed its frozen rivers into the void, while Muspelheim continuously spewed forth its fiery sparks and gusts of searing air. The center of the Ginnungagap became a cosmic battleground. Here, the biting cold of Niflheim met the blazing heat of Muspelheim. Imagine the scene, a silent, slow-motion cataclysm. The hot winds from the south blew across the void, meeting the vast glaciers of rime ice that had crept from the north. The ice did not simply melt the ice, it reacted with it. A great hissing filled the void as sparks from Muspelheim landed on the frozen venom of the Elivagar. The ice began to thaw and drip, but these were no ordinary drops of water. Imbued with the life-giving heat of Muspelheim and the magical elemental substance of Niflheim's ice, the drops began to quicken. They coalesced, gathering in the temperate calm of the central void, and slowly, from this primordial slush of fire and ice, a form began to take shape. This process was not an act of will by a conscious creator. It was a natural, alchemical reaction, a cosmic phenomenon born from the clash of opposites. The Norse worldview did not begin with a divine word or thought, but with a physical, elemental event. The universe was not spoken into existence. It was forged in the crucible of Ginnungagap. The very essence of the cosmos, therefore, was this duality, ice and fire, cold and heat, stasis and chaos, contraction and expansion. This fundamental tension would become the engine of the entire mythological cycle, influencing the nature of the gods, the giants, and the very fate of the world they would come to inhabit. The rime ice, the ancient frost from Niflheim, was called Hrym. The drops that thawed and quickened were born of this. From these drops, life began. It was not a gentle birth. It was a raw, chaotic emergence from the violent union of fundamental forces. In the vast, misty expanse of Ginnungagap, the dripping, life-filled water continued to gather, and the shape grew larger and larger until it formed the likeness of a man, but a being of such staggering size that he could not be called a man. He was the first being in all existence, a creature born of frost and fire. This was the birth of the cosmos, a story not of peace but of conflict. The very foundation of the Norse world was built upon this eternal struggle. Surtur waited in the south, the embodiment of fiery destruction. The frozen rivers of Niflheim continued to flow, a source of raw, chaotic, and giant power. And in the center, in the temperate zone where these two forces met, the first stirrings of life promised a new age. The void was no longer empty. The silence was about to be broken. The stage was set, the first actor was forming, and the grand, tragic, and glorious saga of the Norse gods was about to begin. The question was no longer if life would begin, but what form it would take, and what destiny awaited the first beings to awaken in the Ginnungagap.
The birth of the first beings, Ymir, Audhumla, and the rise of the Aesir. From the primordial soup of melting ice and fiery embers in the heart of Ginnungagap, the first living being took shape. This was Ymir, the ancestor of all giants, a colossal entity whose name means the screamer or twin. He was not a god, nor was he truly a man. He was a Jotun, a frost giant,
the physical embodiment of the raw, untamed, and chaotic forces that had created him. As Ymir lay sleeping in the magical void, the sweat that gathered in his left armpit gave birth to a male and a female giant. From his legs, another monstrous, six-headed giant was born. In this grotesque but fertile fashion, the race of frost giants, the Jotnar, came into being, creatures of rhyme, chaos, and elemental power. But Ymir was not alone. As more of the ice melted, another creature emerged from the frost. This was Audhumla, the rich hornless cow, a cosmic maternal figure. Her existence was symbiotic with Ymir's. From her massive udders flowed 4 great rivers of milk, which provided the sole nourishment for the giant Ymir. While Ymir fed and slept, fathering his monstrous children, the great cow Audhumla sustained herself by licking the salty, rime-covered ice blocks that filled the Ginnungagap. For 3 days, Audhumla licked a particular block of salty ice. On the first day, as the evening drew in, the hair of a man appeared from the block. On the second day, the man's head was uncovered, and by the end of the 3rd day, the entire being was freed from the ice. He was beautiful, strong, and powerful. His name was Buri, which means the progenitor or the producer. He was the very first of the race of gods, a being distinct from the chaotic frost giants. He was not born of Ymir's flesh, but was instead revealed, as if he had been encased within the primordial ice all along, waiting to be released. Buri, in time, would have his own son, named Bor, which means simply son or the born. The line of the gods was established. Bor, the son of the first god, seeking a mate, looked to the race of giants. He took as his wife a Jotun named Bestla, the daughter of the giant Bullthorn. This union is of monumental importance. It signifies that from the very beginning, the bloodlines of gods and giants were intertwined. The divine was mingled with the chaotic. Order was born from a union with the very forces it would later seek to control. This relationship, part familial, part adversarial, would define the central conflict of Norse mythology. From the union of Bor, the son of the first god, and Bestla, the daughter of a giant, 3 sons were born. These 3 brothers were the first of the gods to be called the Aesir. Their names were Odin, Vili, and Ve. As these 3 divine brothers grew in power and wisdom, they looked upon the state of the cosmos. They saw the vast, formless void of Ginnungagap. They saw the lumbering, chaotic giant Ymir, and the ever-growing brood of Jotnar he was spawning. They recognized that this state of raw, untamed creation was unsustainable. It lacked purpose, structure, and order. Ymir and his kin represented a perpetual, bubbling chaos that threatened to consume all of existence. The brothers, possessing an innate drive for order, knew that for a true world to be made, the age of Ymir had to end. And so, Odin, Vili, and Ve resolved to commit the first act of violence, the first murder in the history of the cosmos. They rose up against the colossal Ymir, their own indirect ancestor. The battle that ensued must have been cataclysmic. The 3 young gods, embodiments of nascent order, against the primordial giant who was the very source of chaotic life. Though Ymir was immense and powerful, the brothers were driven by destiny and a will to shape the universe. They fought and overwhelmed the great frost giant, and in the end, they killed him. When Ymir fell, the blood, or rather the black, venomous ichor of his veins, gushed forth from his wounds in a torrential flood. So vast was the deluge that it drowned almost the entire race of frost giants. Only 2 survived, Ymir's grandson, Bergelmir, and his wife. They escaped the bloody tide by climbing into a wooden trough, or ludr, which served as a makeshift boat. Floating to safety, they landed on the shores of a new, dark land that would become the realm of the giants, Jotunheim. From this single pair, the race of Jotnar would be reborn, forever nursing a bitter grudge against the gods for the slaying of their ancestor. This act of primordial slaughter sowed the seeds of an eternal war, a conflict that would culminate in the final battle of Ragnarok. The death of Ymir was not merely an act of destruction, it was the ultimate act of creation. It was a sacrifice, though unwilling on Ymir's part, that would provide the raw materials for a structured, habitable world. The age of chaotic beginnings was over. The reign of giants as the sole masters of the void had ended. With the corpse of their great ancestor lying before them, Odin, Vili, and Ve now possessed the means to build a new cosmos, to bring light, land, and life to the Ginnungagap. They were no longer just the sons of Bor. They were the architects of reality, the shapers of worlds. The stage was cleared, the foundation was laid, and the brothers were ready to begin their monumental task of crafting a universe from the body of a dead giant. The formless was about to be given form, and the silent void was about to be filled with the 9 realms.
The creation of the world. Odin, Vili, and Ve shape Midgard. With the colossal corpse of the frost giant Ymir lying in the center of Ginnungagap, Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, stood as the new masters of the cosmos. They were no longer simply rebels against a chaotic tyrant. They were now creators, possessing both the will and the raw material to forge a new reality. The act of slaying Ymir was the necessary deconstruction before the grand construction could begin. Every part of the slain giant's body was destined to become a feature of the new world. The brothers began their immense task. They dragged the massive body of Ymir to the very center of Ginnungagap. From his flesh, they fashioned the earth. This was not a smooth, perfect sphere, but a textured, organic landscape of plains, valleys, and mountains. The soil itself was the muscle and tissue of this ancient being. From Ymir's unbroken bones, they raised the great mountain ranges that would crisscross the land. His smaller bones and teeth they shattered and scattered, creating the rocks, stones, and pebbles that littered the new earth. The world was literally built from the remains of its first inhabitant. Next, they turned their attention to the great flood of Ymir's blood that had drowned his giant kin. They gathered this vast ocean of blood and used it to form the seas and oceans that would encircle the land. They dug out the great lake beds and carved the winding river channels, filling them with the primordial liquid. The world now had land and water, a solid foundation surrounded by a deep, dark sea. Looking up, the brothers saw the gaping emptiness of the void. They needed a sky. For this, they took the enormous curved skull of Ymir and hoisted it high above the earth. This vast bone-white dome became the firmament, the vault of the heavens. To hold it in place, they assigned 4 powerful dwarves to stand at the 4 corners of the world and support the sky. These dwarves were named Nordri, Sudri, Austri, and Vestri, north, south, east, and west, giving the world its cardinal directions. The world was formed, but it was dark and lifeless. To bring light, Odin, Vili, and Ve ventured to the fiery realm of Muspelheim. They captured the glowing embers and fiery sparks that shot forth from its volcanic furnaces. They took these sparks and carefully arranged them in the sky, setting them in place in Ymir's skull. The larger, more brilliant embers became the sun and the moon,
while the countless smaller sparks became the stars. To guide the sun and the moon on their daily and nightly journeys across the sky, they were placed in chariots. The sun's chariot was pulled by two horses named Árvakr, early waker, and Alsvidr, very swift, and a shield named Svalin was placed before the sun to protect the earth from its searing heat. The moon's chariot was pulled by the horse Alsvidr. The gods even dictated the cycles of day and night, the turning of the seasons and the passage of years, bringing time and predictable order to their creation. Yet there was one part of Ymir's body left, his brain. The brothers took Ymir's cold, damp brain and threw it into the air, beneath the dome of the sky. It scattered and became the clouds, bringing weather, mist, rain, and snow to the world. Finally, from Ymir's eyebrows, the gods constructed a mighty defensive wall. This fortification encircled the most fertile and temperate part of the earth. The realm within this wall they named Midgard, the Middle Yard, or Middle Earth. This was to be the realm of humankind, a protected sanctuary between the fiery heavens above and the frozen depths below. The land outside the wall of Midgard was given to the surviving giants and their descendants. This realm was called Jotunheim, the land of giants. The animosity between the two realms was thus built into the very geography of the world. The ordered, protected realm of future humans and the chaotic wildlands of the giants, separated by a barrier made from the eyebrows of their slain ancestor. With the world built, the lands shaped, and the heavens illuminated, the brothers walked along the shores of the newly formed ocean. They found two pieces of lifeless driftwood washed ashore, one from an ash tree, the other from an elm tree. They were inert, without spirit or purpose. Odin, the eldest and wisest, approached them and breathed into them the spirit of life. They were no longer dead wood, they were alive. Vili, the second brother, gifted them with consciousness and intelligence, the ability to think, feel, and understand. They, the third brother, gave them the senses, the ability to see, hear, speak, and touch, and gave them their outward human form. From the ash tree they had created the first man, and they named him Ask. From the elm tree they had created the first woman, and named her Embla. Ask and Embla were the progenitors of all humanity. The gods gave them the realm of Midgard as their home, a place to live, to build, and to raise their children, protected from the chaos of the outer worlds. The act of creation was complete. Odin, Vili, and Ve had transformed a universe of chaotic potential into a cosmos of structure, purpose, and life. They had separated light from darkness, land from sea, and order from chaos. They had forged a world from the body of their enemy, established the cycles of time, and created humanity to inhabit the central realm. But the materials of creation carried with them an indelible memory. The world was made from a giant, and the giants, exiled to the fringes in Jotunheim, would never forget. The ocean was made of Ynir's blood, and it seethed with ancient rage. The mountains, his bones, stood as silent, grim monuments to the first cosmic murder. The very ground beneath humanity's feet was a constant reminder that the order of the gods was built on a foundation of violence. This inherent tension would ensure that peace in the new world would be fragile and fleeting. The work of creation was done, but the work of maintaining it against the forces of chaos had only just begun.
The 9 realms and Yggdrasil, the world tree and cosmic structure. The world forged by Odin and his brothers was not a single flat plane, but a complex, multi-layered cosmos. This universe was comprised of 9 realms, 9 distinct worlds, each with its own inhabitants, geography, and purpose. While these realms were separate, they were not isolated. They were all connected, held together in the cosmic branches and roots of a single, colossal, and sacred entity, the World Tree, Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is not merely a tree, it is the very axis of the Norse universe, the pillar that supports and binds all of creation. It is an immense ash tree, eternally green, whose branches stretch out to tower over all the 9 realms, and whose roots delve deep into the hidden foundations of the cosmos. Its name is fraught with meaning, most often translated as Odin's horse or steed of the terrible one, referencing the time Odin hung himself from the tree to gain the knowledge of the runes, a sacrifice where he rode the tree like a gallows. Yggdrasil is the conduit of life, knowledge, and fate. The 9 realms are situated within and around this great tree. While the exact cartography can be ambiguous in the ancient texts, a general structure emerges. At the highest level, in the uppermost branches of Yggdrasil, bathed in sunlight, lies Asgard, the enclosure of the Aesir. This is the celestial fortress of the main pantheon of gods, the Aesir. Here, Odin has his great hall of Valhalla, and here the gods live in splendor, protected by an impenetrable wall built by a giant in disguise. Asgard represents divine order, strength, and authority. Also among the upper realms is Vanaheim, the home of the Vanir gods. The Vanir are a second family of gods, associated with fertility, wisdom, and nature. The exact location of Vanaheim is unclear, but it is a realm of prosperity and magic, separate from, but allied with Asgard after a long and bitter war. Another realm of light is Alfheim, or Ljós-Alfheim, the home of the light elves. These beings are described as being fairer than the sun to look upon, and they are associated with beauty, art, and the air. Alfheim is ruled by the Vanir god Freyr. In the center of the cosmos, held in place by the trunk of Yggdrasil, lies Midgard, the Middle Yard. This is our world, the realm of humanity. It is intentionally placed in the middle, a temperate and balanced world, but also a vulnerable one, positioned between the heavens above and the shadowy realms below. It is connected to Asgard by the Bifrost, a shimmering, burning rainbow bridge guarded by the ever-watchful god Heimdall. Encircling Midgard is the great ocean, and beyond that, on the same earthly plane, is Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, or Jotnir. This is a wild, mountainous, and often frozen land of chaos, a constant threat to the order of both Midgard and Asgard. Further into the darker, more primal regions of the world, we find Svartalfheim, which means dark fields or black elf home. This is a subterranean world of caves and forges, the domain of the dwarves. The dwarves are master craftsmen, smiths without equal, who mine the earth for precious metals and forge the legendary treasures of the gods. Their realm is of stone, fire, and industry. At the very bottom of the cosmic structure, in the cold and dark depths, are the primordial realms. Niflheim, the ancient world of ice and mist that existed before creation, remains. Within Niflheim lies a specific, grim domain known as Helhelm, or simply Hell. This is the afterlife for those who die of sickness, old age, or any cause other than glorious battle, the vast majority of souls. It is ruled by the goddess Hel, Loki's daughter, a being whose face is half that of a beautiful woman and half a rotting corpse.
Helhelm is a gloomy, inescapable place surrounded by the river Gjoll. Finally, there is Muspelhelm, the primordial realm of fire, which also predates creation. It remains in the south, a searing inferno ruled by the giant Surtur and his firekin. Like Niflheim, it is a fundamental part of the cosmic balance, an ever-present force of destruction that will one day be unleashed upon the world. Yggdrasil itself is a universe teeming with life. An eagle with a hawk named Veðurfolnir perched between its eyes sits in its highest branches, observing all that happens. A squirrel named Ratatoskr, Drilled Tooth, scurries up and down the trunk carrying insulting messages and gossip between the eagle at the top and a great serpent or dragon named Nidhogg, Malice Striker, who gnaws at its roots from below. 4 stags, Dane, Dwalin, Dunair, and Durathroer, roam its branches eating the leaves. This constant cycle of damage and renewal reflects the fragile but enduring nature of the cosmos. Yggdrasil is sustained by 3 immense roots, which anchor it in the fundamental sources of power. The first root stretches to Asgard, where it is nourished by the well of Urd, the sacred well of fate. Here dwelled the 3 Norns, Urd, what once was, Verdandi, what is coming into being, and Skuld, what shall be. They weave the destinies of all beings, including the gods. Their pronouncements are absolute. The second root reaches down into Jotunheim, the land of the giants, and draws water from the well of Mimir, the well of wisdom and knowledge. Its guardian is the wise giant Mimir, and it was to this well that Odin sacrificed his eye to gain cosmic insight. The third and final route descends into the depths of Niflheim to the spring of Hvergelmir, the source of all the cold rivers and the place where the dragon Nidhogg chews relentlessly. Yggdrasil is therefore the lifeblood of the 9 realms. It is the stage upon which the entire drama of Norse mythology unfolds. Its health is a direct reflection of the health of the cosmos. As long as it stands, there is a connection between worlds, a flow of wisdom, and a thread of fate. But the prophecies of Ragnarok foretell a time when the tree will groan and tremble, signaling the beginning of the end. The structure of the 9 realms which held
The Aesir and the Vanir. War, peace, and divine alliances. Within the celestial fortress of Asgard and the fertile fields of Vanaheim lived 2 distinct families of gods, the Aesir and the Vanir. While we often group them together as the Norse pantheon, their relationship was complex, beginning with a bitter and destructive war before settling into a hard-won peace. This conflict, known as the Aesir-Vanir War, was the very first war in the cosmos, and it fundamentally shaped the divine society that would govern the 9 realms. The Aesir, led by the formidable Odin, were gods of power, war, and authority. They were associated with the sky, with law, with structure, and with the martial prowess needed to defend the ordered worlds from the chaos of the giants. Figures like Thor, the thunderous protector, Tyr, the god of law and heroic glory, and Frigg, the queenly goddess of foresight, were all Aesir. They were the rulers, the warriors, and the architects of the cosmos, residing in the magnificent, fortified realm of Asgard. Their focus was on maintaining order through strength and decree. The Vanir, on the other hand, were gods of a different nature. Residing in Vanaheim, they were associated with the earth, the sea, and the untamed wilderness. They were masters of fertility, prosperity, and sensuous love. More mysteriously, they were also practitioners of a powerful and esoteric form of magic known as seidr, a practice involving prophecy, shape-shifting, and influencing the minds of others. The most prominent Vanir were the twins Freyr and Freya, deities of harvest and love respectively, and their father Njord, the god of the sea, wind, and wealth. The Vanir represented the natural cycles of life, abundance, and a form of power that was more subtle and mystical than the brute force of the Aesir. The war began, according to the sagas, over a Vanir goddess named Guldveig, which translates to gold drunk or gold power. Guldveig came to Asgard, and her obsession with gold and her powerful, potentially corrupting magic deeply unsettled the Aesir. They saw her influence as a threat to their stern, honor-based society. In a brutal display, they captured her, pierced her with spears, and threw her into the great fire in Odin's hall. But such was the power of her Vanir magic that she was reborn from the flames. Twice more they burned her, and twice more she emerged, reborn and unharmed. When word of this brutal treatment reached the Vanir, they were enraged. They demanded reparations, either a great payment of tribute or that they be accepted as equals among the Aesir, sharing in the sacrifices and in the worship. The Aesir, proud and unwilling to yield, refused. They mobilized for war. The conflict that followed was devastating. The Aesir had the advantage in conventional warfare, with their mighty weapons and warrior strength. Thor, with his hammer Mjolnir, and Tyr, with his spear Gungnir, were formidable forces. But the Vanir had their own advantages. They were masters of magic that the Aesir had never encountered. They could crumble fortifications with their spells and fight with the forces of nature itself. For a long time the war raged, with neither side being able to gain a decisive victory. Asgard's walls were breached and broken by Vanir magic, and Vanaheim's fields were ravaged by Aesir armies. Eventually both sides grew weary of the endless destructive stalemate. They realized that neither could truly conquer the other, and that their continued conflict only served to weaken them both, leaving them vulnerable to their common enemies, the giants of Jotunheim. They called a truce and met to negotiate a lasting peace. To seal their new alliance and ensure its permanence, they agreed to an exchange of hostages, a common practice in the ancient Norse world. This was not a punitive measure, but a way to build trust and integrate the two families. The Vanir sent their most distinguished members to live in Asgard: Njord, the wealthy god of the sea, and his two beautiful and powerful children, Freyr and Freya. In their wake, they brought their knowledge of fertility, prosperity, and the powerful magic of seidr. It was Freya who would teach this magic to Odin himself, profoundly expanding his own mystical power. In return, the Aesir sent two of their own to Vanaheim. One was Höenir, a tall, handsome, and seemingly decisive god. To advise him, they also sent the wisest of all beings, the giant Mimir. At first, the Vanir were pleased. When Höenir was present with Mimir, he gave excellent counsel and made wise decisions. However, the Vanir soon discovered a problem. Whenever Mimir was not by his side, Höenir became utterly indecisive and useless. He would answer any query with the same non-committal phrase, "Let others decide." Feeling they had been tricked and given a worthless leader, the Vanir took a gruesome revenge. They seized Mimir, beheaded him, and sent his head back to Odin in Asgard. This act could easily have reignited the war, but Odin, in a moment of supreme wisdom, did not retaliate. He took the head of Mimir, embalmed it with special herbs to prevent its decay, and chanted magical spells over it.
He restored to the head the power of speech, and from then on, the severed head of Mimir became one of Odin's most treasured counselors, providing him with secret knowledge and wisdom from the other worlds. To finally cement their union, the Aesir and Vanir performed a ritual. All the gods from both tribes spat into a single vat. From this divine saliva, they created a being named Kvasir, who was so wise that there was no question he could not answer. Kvasir traveled the world sharing his knowledge with all. His eventual murder and the brewing of his blood into the mead of poetry is a story in itself, but his creation symbolized the final perfect blending of the two divine clans. Thus the Aesir-Vanir War ended, not in conquest, but in synthesis. The Norse pantheon became a composite group. The warrior Aesir and the fertile Vanir merged, creating a more balanced and powerful divine society. Freyr and Freya became some of the most beloved and widely worshipped deities, even within Asgard. The Aesir, in turn, gained access to new forms of magic and an appreciation for prosperity and nature. This alliance was crucial, for in the coming ages, facing the relentless threat of the giants and the looming shadow of Ragnarok, the gods would need to be united. They would need the strength of Thor, the wisdom of Odin, and the magic of Freya.
At the pinnacle of the Norse pantheon, ruling from his high seat, Hlidskjalf in Asgard, sits the most complex and enigmatic of all the gods, Odin. He is known by countless names: the All-Father, the Terrible One, the Wanderer, the Hanged God, the Raven God. Each name reveals a different facet of his character. He is not a benevolent fatherly king in the modern sense. He is a god of war, but also of poetry. He is a ruler, but also a restless seeker. He is a master of magic, but his power was not given. It was bought at a terrible price. More than anything else, Odin is defined by his insatiable, obsessive quest for knowledge and wisdom, a pursuit for which no sacrifice is too great. As the chief of the Aesir, Odin is a god of war and battle. But unlike his son Thor, who represents physical might and straightforward combat, Odin is the master of strategy, intellect, and the psychological terrors of war. He is the god of the berserkers, the wild warriors who entered a trance-like fury, and he could inspire panic in enemy ranks with his magic. Warriors who died bravely in battle were chosen by his Valkyries to feast in his great hall, Valhalla, where they would train to become his army, the Einherjar, for the final battle of Ragnarok. This obsession with gathering the best warriors reveals his core anxiety. Odin knows the prophecies. He knows the end is coming, and his every action is colored by the desperate need to prepare for that inevitable doom. But his warlike nature is matched, and perhaps even surpassed, by his role as a god of wisdom. The All-Father's greatest battles were fought not on a field, but within himself, in his relentless pursuit of knowledge. The stories of his sacrifices are legendary. To gain a drink from the well of Mimir, the well of cosmic wisdom, hidden beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, Odin willingly paid the price demanded by its giant guardian. He gouged out one of his own eyes and dropped it into the water. He traded physical sight for inner sight, sacrificing a part of his perception of the world in order to understand it more deeply. From that day on, Odin is depicted as a one-eyed god, a perpetual reminder that true wisdom requires sacrifice. But his most profound act of self-sacrifice, however, took place upon the world tree itself. Seeking mastery of the runes, the ancient mystical symbols that held the secrets of the cosmos, Odin underwent a shamanic ordeal. He pierced himself with his spear, Gungnir, and hung himself from a branch of Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights.
He was wounded, without food or water, suspended between life and death, between the worlds. He was, in his own words from the poem Havamal, offered to Odin, myself to myself. On the 9th night, as he teetered on the brink of death, he peered down into the depths, and with a scream, the secrets of the runes were revealed to him. He fell from the tree, reborn with immense power and knowledge. This act earned him the name Yggdrasil, Odin's horse, and established him as the master of the runes and the most powerful magician among the gods. It demonstrates a core tenet of the Norse worldview. Knowledge is not a gift. It is a prize that must be seized, often through pain and suffering. Odin is rarely seen sitting idly on his throne. He is the great wanderer, often traveling through the 9 realms, particularly Midgard, in disguise. He typically appears as a gray-bearded old man in a wide-brimmed hat and a dark cloak, seeking to test the hospitality and wisdom of mortals and to gather information. He is constantly probing, questioning, and engaging in contests of knowledge with giants and wise men, always seeking to learn more. He is accompanied by a host of animal familiars who serve as his eyes and ears across the cosmos. 2 ravens, Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory, fly out across the world each morning and return at night to perch on his shoulders and whisper all the news they have gathered. Their daily flight represents Odin's far-reaching consciousness. He worries constantly for their return, especially from Munin, memory, perhaps fearing that what is forgotten is truly lost. 2 wolves, Geri, ravenous, and Freki, lie at his feet in Valhalla. He gives them all the food from his plate, for he himself consumes nothing but wine or mead. His sustenance is purely spiritual, not physical. He also rides an incredible 8-legged steed named Sleipnir, the child of Loki, who can gallop across the sky, over the sea, and even into the realm of the dead. Odin's family reflects his complex domain. His wife is the powerful and wise queen of Asgard, Frigg, who knows the fates of all beings but rarely speaks of them. He is the father of many famous gods, including the mighty Thor, the gentle Balder, the blind Hodor, and the silent Vidar. Yet he is also the blood brother of Loki, the trickster god of chaos. By swearing an oath of brotherhood with Loki, Odin invited chaos into the very heart of Asgard. It was a risky, perhaps even foolish decision, but it may have been another of Odin's gambles, an attempt to understand and control the forces of chaos by keeping them close. Ultimately, Odin is a tragic figure. Despite all his wisdom, all his magic, and all his preparations, he knows he cannot avert his own fate. The prophecy of the Volva, the seeress, is clear. At Ragnarok, he will lead the gods and the heroes of Valhalla into battle, and he will be killed and devoured by the monstrous wolf Fenrir, a son of Loki. His entire existence is a struggle against a predestined end. He doesn't fight to win, because he knows he cannot. He fights to face his doom with honor, to delay the inevitable, and to ensure that the final battle is a glorious one. Odin the All-Father is the embodiment of the noble, tragic struggle against a merciless fate, a king who sacrifices everything for a knowledge that tells him he is doomed.
Thor the Thunderer, the protector of gods and men. If Odin is the mind of the Norse pantheon, then his most famous son, Thor, is its heart and muscle. He is the champion of Asgard, the protector of Midgard, and the relentless enemy of the giants. Known as the Thunderer, his arrival is announced by the roar of thunder and the flash of lightning as he rides his chariot across the sky, pulled by 2 goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjustr. With his fiery red beard, immense strength, and ferocious temper, Thor is the archetypal warrior god, a straightforward, powerful, and ultimately reliable force for order in a chaotic universe. Unlike his father, the cunning and morally ambiguous Odin, Thor is a god of action, not introspection. He is not concerned with prophecies, complex magic, or philosophical riddles. His worldview is simple. There are those who threaten the stability of the worlds, namely the giants, and it is his sacred duty to smash them. He is the divine everyman, beloved by the common folk of the Viking Age, who saw in him a protector who faced problems head-on with courage and a mighty hammer. While Odin was worshipped by kings, poets, and mystics, Thor was the god of the farmer, the sailor, and the warrior, anyone who relied on strength and fortitude to survive in a harsh world. Thor's power is embodied by 3 legendary artifacts. The first and most famous is his warhammer, Mjolnir, the Crusher. Forged by the master dwarven smiths Brokkr and Ithri, Mjolnir is no ordinary weapon. It is a symbol of both destruction and protection. When thrown, it never misses its target and always returns to Thor's hand. It can shrink to be hidden in his tunic or grow to colossal size. With it, Thor can summon lightning and storms. But Mjolnir is also a tool of sanctification. It was used to hallow weddings, bless newborn children, and consecrate funeral pyres, making it a symbol of order and blessing as much as a weapon of war. To wield the immense power of Mjolnir, Thor requires his second artifact, a pair of iron gauntlets called Jarngrip, the Iron Grippers. Without them, even the mighty Thor could not handle the hammer's raw power. His third item of power is the belt Megingjerd, the belt of strength. When he wears this belt, his already godlike strength is doubled, making him arguably the most physically powerful being in all the 9 realms. The tales of Thor's adventures are numerous and almost always involve his favorite pastime, giant slaying. The sagas are filled with his journeys into Jotunheim, the land of the giants, often accompanied by the cunning and troublesome Loki. One of the most famous tales is his visit to the castle of the giant king Utgarda-Loki. There, Thor and his companions are subjected to a series of deceptive contests designed to humiliate them. Thor is challenged to a drinking contest, but the horn he is given is magically connected to the ocean, and though he drinks so much that he lowers the sea level, he cannot empty it. He is asked to lift a giant cat, but the cat is actually the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, in disguise. Thor strains so mightily that he manages to lift one of its paws from the floor, an act that terrified the giants. Finally, he is challenged to wrestle an old woman named Ellie. Thor wrestles with all his might, but is slowly forced to one knee. Later, Utgarda-Loki reveals the deception. The old woman was old age itself, a force that no being, even a god, can defeat. Though seemingly humiliated, the story reveals Thor's incredible power. He literally drank part of the ocean, nearly lifted the world serpent, and wrestled with time itself. Another epic tale recounts his fishing trip with the giant Hymir. Determined to face his ultimate nemesis, Thor uses the head of an ox as bait on a massive fishing line and rows far out to sea. He casts his line into the depths and hooks the colossal Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, the world-encircling snake that is also a child of Loki. The struggle is cosmic in scale. Thor pulls with all his might, his feet crashing through the bottom of the boat to brace themselves on the seafloor. The serpent writhes and spews venom, and the entire world shakes from their battle. Just as Thor raises Mjolnir to deliver a killing blow, the terrified giant Hymir cuts the line, allowing the serpent to escape back into the depths. Thor is enraged, but the confrontation is a chilling foreshadowing of their final, fateful meeting at Ragnarok. Thor's role as protector extends beyond Asgard to the realm of humanity. He is the guardian of Midgard, and the thunderstorms that mortals witnessed were seen as evidence of his ongoing battles against the forces of chaos that constantly threatened to encroach upon the human world. His goat-drawn chariot also possessed a magical quality. If Thor was ever in need of food on his travels, he could kill and cook his goats. As long as their bones were gathered up and placed back into their skins, he could use Mjolnir to resurrect them the next morning, whole and unharmed once more. This demonstrates his connection to cycles of life and sustenance, reinforcing his role as a provider and protector. Thor's family life centers around his beautiful golden-haired wife, the goddess Sif. He also has two sons, Magni, meaning mighty, and Modi, meaning wrath, and a daughter, Thrúðr, meaning strength. It is prophesied that Magni and Modi will survive Ragnarok and inherit their father's hammer, Mjolnir, suggesting that the protective power of Thor will endure even after the world's end.
Freya and Freyr, fertility, love, and the Vanir legacy. When the Great Aesir-Vanir War concluded, the exchange of hostages brought a new and vibrant energy into the halls of Asgard. The arrival of the Vanir deities, Njord and his twin children, Freya and Freyr, infused the stern martial society of the Aesir with powerful currents of love, fertility, wealth, and a profound mystical magic. Of these Vanir, none are more captivating or more essential to the Norse pantheon than the twins, Freya and Freyr. They are the legacy of the Vanir, embodying the life-giving, prosperous forces of nature that balance the warlike tendencies of their Aesir allies. Freyr, whose name simply means Lord, is a god of peace, prosperity, and bountiful harvests. He is the ruler of Alfheim, the realm of the light elves, and he commands the sun and the rain, ensuring the fertility of the earth. Freyr is a god of radiant life and abundance. He is depicted as handsome and benevolent, a bringer of good seasons and wealth, and he was widely worshipped by farmers and those seeking peace and plenty. Unlike the fierce warrior gods, Freyr represents a different kind of masculine power, one of gentle lordship, generosity, and life-affirming strength. His most prized possessions reflect his peaceful and prosperous nature. He owns a magical ship called Skidbladnir, one of the treasures created thanks to Loki's scheming. This remarkable vessel is large enough to hold all the gods of Asgard, yet it can be folded up like a piece of cloth and tucked into a pouch. It always has a favorable wind, no matter which direction it is sailing. He also has a golden-bristled boar named Gulinbarti, golden-bristled. This boar can run faster than any horse, over land, sea, or air, and its glowing bristles illuminate the darkest night. Freyr often rides this boar into battle, a shining symbol of the wild, fertile power of the earth. But his story is also one of profound sacrifice for love. From Odin's high seat, Flidskjalf, Freyr once gazed out across the 9 realms and saw in the land of the giants a beautiful giantess named Gerd. He was instantly overcome with a deep, obsessive love for her, so powerful that he could no longer eat or speak, languishing in lovesickness. He sent his loyal servant Skirnir to Jotunheim to woo the giantess on his behalf. To convince Skirnir to undertake this perilous journey, Freyr gave him his most powerful weapon, a magical sword that could fight all on its own.
Skirnir journeyed to Gerd's hall and tried to win her for Freyr with gifts of golden apples and Odin's ring, Draupnir, but she refused. He then resorted to threats, promising to curse her with a powerful spell that would make her hideous and miserable forever. Under this duress, Gerd finally relented, agreeing to meet Freyr in a secluded grove in 9 nights' time. Freyr was overjoyed, but lamented the agonizingly long wait. This story shows the immense power of love and desire in the Norse world, a force that could compel even a great god to give away his most vital possession. The loss of his sword, however, has dire consequences. The prophecies state that at Ragnarok, Freyr will face the mighty fire giant Surtur. Lacking his magical sword, Freyr will fight bravely, but will ultimately be slain, one of the first of the gods to fall. His sacrifice for love seals his doom. His twin sister, Freya, whose name means lady, is arguably the most powerful and complex goddess in the entire pantheon. She is not merely a goddess of love and beauty, though she certainly embodies those things. She is a figure of immense power, a fierce warrior, a master of magic, and the ruler of her own afterlife realm. Freya is the goddess of love, sex, beauty, and desire. She is invoked in matters of the heart, and is portrayed as a passionate, independent, and sexually liberated figure who takes many gods and other beings as her lovers. Her most famous treasure is the Brisingamen, a magnificent gleaming necklace forged by 4 dwarves. To obtain it, she spent 1 night with each of the 4 craftsmen, a transaction that highlights her command over her own desire and her willingness to use it to acquire power and beauty. When Loki later reveals this story to mock her, it is clear he misunderstands her. Freya is a figure of power, not shame. But her beauty and sensuality are matched by a fierce warlike aspect. When she rides to battle, she does so in a chariot pulled not by horses, but by 2 large cats, creatures that are both loving and ferocious, much like the goddess herself. She is the leader of the Valkyries, the choosers of the slain, and she has a claim to the souls of fallen warriors. Of all the heroes who die bravely in battle, Odin takes half for his Hall of Valhalla, but Freya chooses the other half to reside with her in her own afterlife realm, Folkvanger, the Field of the People. Her hall within this realm is called Sessrumnir, roomy seated. This shows that she is Odin's equal in her claim to martial glory, a warrior queen in her own right. Perhaps Freya's most significant contribution to the gods of Asgard is her mastery of Seid. This was the powerful shamanic magic of the Vanir, concerned with discerning and shaping fate. It was considered somewhat unmanly for male gods to practice, but Odin, in his endless quest for knowledge, was willing to break any taboo. It was Freya who taught Odin the secrets of Seid, granting him one of his most potent forms of power. This act cemented her status as one of the most influential figures in Asgard. She also possesses a magical cloak of falcon feathers, which allows its wearer to shapeshift into a bird and fly between the realms. This cloak is often borrowed by other gods, particularly Loki, to undertake secret missions, further highlighting Freya's role as a provider of essential magical tools. Her story is also touched by sorrow. She is married to a mysterious god named Od, who is often on long journeys. Freya weeps tears of red gold for her absent husband, wandering the realms in search of him. This aspect adds a layer of longing and loyalty to her otherwise fiercely independent character. Together, Freyr and Freya represent the enduring legacy of the Vanir. They brought with them the essential forces of life that the martial Aesir lacked. Freyr ensures the world is fertile and prosperous, while Freya governs the powerful, untamable forces of love, desire, magic, and war.
They demonstrate that power in the Norse cosmos is multifaceted. It is not just the strength to destroy, but also the strength to create, to love, and to inspire. Though they are Vanir by birth, they are indispensable to Asgard, and their presence creates a richer, more complete pantheon, one that needs both the warrior and the lover, the king and the farmer, to face the coming darkness.
The Jotnar, giants, monsters, and cosmic enemies. In the wild, untamed lands of Jotunheim, beyond the protective borders of Midgard and Asgard, dwell the most persistent and formidable adversaries of the gods, the Jotnar, or giants. To call them simply giants is misleading. While many are indeed of colossal size, the term Jotun is better understood as devourer or etin. They are not merely large, dim-witted brutes. They are a diverse race of ancient, powerful, and often highly intelligent beings who represent the raw, untamed forces of nature and chaos. They are the antithesis of the gods' structured order, and their eternal conflict is the central engine of Norse mythology. The Jotnar are the oldest beings in the cosmos, descended from the primordial giant Ymir, whose body was used to create the world. This makes them, in a sense, the original inhabitants and inheritors of the universe. Their grudge against the gods is ancient and deeply personal, stemming from the day Odin and his brothers slew Ymir and drowned their ancestors in his blood. From their grim mountainous realm of Jotunheim, they look upon the ordered worlds of Asgard and Midgard with jealousy and hatred, constantly seeking to reclaim what they believe is rightfully theirs. They are beings of elemental power. The frost giants are associated with the crushing ice and biting winds of the primordial realm of Niflheim. The fire giants, led by the colossal Surtur, embody the destructive inferno of Muspelheim. There are also mountain giants who can hurl boulders as if they were pebbles, and sea giants like the terrifying Nine Sisters who, in some tales, are said to be the mothers of the god Heimdall. They are inextricably linked to the dangerous, untamed aspects of the natural world: avalanches, blizzards, volcanic eruptions, and raging seas. While some giants, like the oafish Hrungnir, who challenged Thor to a duel, are portrayed as dull and brutish, many are the gods' equals or even superiors in wisdom and cunning. Mimir, the guardian of the Well of Wisdom, was a giant. Vafthrûdnir was a giant so wise in the lore of the cosmos that he dared to challenge Odin himself to a contest of knowledge, a contest he only lost when Odin asked a question that only he could know the answer to. Utgard the Loki, the king who humiliated Thor with his illusions, was a master of magic and deception far beyond what Thor could comprehend. The Jotnar possess an ancient primordial wisdom that the younger race of gods often seeks, even as they fight against them. The relationship between the gods and giants is not of simple black and white enmity. It is a complex web of conflict, rivalry, and, surprisingly, family ties. The gods are not a pure race. Odin himself is half giant, his mother being the giantess Besla. Thor's mother, Jord, is the personification of the earth, a giantess. The handsome Vanir god Freyr fell desperately in love with the giantess Gareth and made her his wife. Even the mighty Thor had a giantess lover, Jarnsaxa, with whom he fathered his sons Magni and Modi. Loki, the ultimate agent of chaos, is a full-blooded giant who lives in Asgard. This intermingling of bloodlines is a crucial aspect of the mythology. It suggests that the line between order, the gods, and chaos, the giants, is not a clear, impenetrable wall, but a blurry, permeable membrane. The gods carry the giant kin within them, an internal seed of chaos that often manifests in their own pride, greed, and destructive rages. This complex relationship means that the cosmic war is, in many ways, a family feud on a grand scale, a battle of cousins fighting over an inheritance.
The Jotnar are the primary antagonists in the majority of Norse myths. They are the thieves who steal the god's most precious artifacts, like the giant Thrym, who stole Thor's hammer Mjolnir and demanded the goddess Freyja as his wife in exchange for its return. This led to the famous story of Thor dressing as a bride to infiltrate Thrym's hall and smash the skulls of the assembled giants at his wedding feast. They are the builders who try to trick the gods, like the master builder who demanded the sun, moon, and Freyja for building Asgard's wall. They are the constant threat on the horizon, the force that gives the warrior gods their purpose. Without the giants to fight, Thor would have no one to protect from Midgard, and Odin would have less urgency in gathering his army of Einherjar for Ragnarok. The giant's home, Jotunheim, is described as a harsh and perilous land. It is a place of immense forests, dark mountains, and frozen rivers where the laws of the gods do not apply. Its primary fortress is called Utgard, the outer yard, a place of powerful magic and illusion. To reach it, one must cross treacherous terrain and face monstrous guardians. It is the physical manifestation of the chaotic wilderness that lies just beyond the boundaries of civilization. At Ragnarok, the giants will play their ultimate role as the army of destruction. The frost giants will march on the final battlefield of Vigrid, led by Hrym. The fire giant Surtur will emerge from Muspelheim with his flaming sword, burning the world and killing the god Freyr. And Loki, freed from his bonds, will lead the forces of Hel and the giants from the ship Naglfar. They will be joined by their monstrous kin, the wolf Fenrir and the serpent Jormungandr, in a final all-out assault on the gods. The Jotnar are more than just monsters. They are a necessary force in the Norse cosmos. They represent the chaos that existed before order, the untamed nature that resists civilization, and the ancient brooding memory of a world that once belonged to them. They are the shadow against which the light of Asgard is defined. Their constant pressure keeps the gods sharp. Their threats give heroes purpose, and their inevitable final uprising provides the dramatic, tragic conclusion to the entire mythological cycle. They are the cosmic enemy, the estranged relatives, and the ultimate agents of fate's decree.
The goddesses of Asgard: Frigg, Idun, and Skadi. While the sagas and Eddas often focus on the thunderous exploits of male gods like Odin and Thor, the divine society of Asgard was equally shaped by a host of powerful and influential goddesses, known as the Asinjur. These were not merely wives and mothers sitting in the background. They were deities with their own domains of power, distinct personalities, and critical roles in the cosmic drama. From the queenly seeress who shared Odin's throne to the fierce giantess who hunted in the mountains, the goddesses of Asgard represent the vital feminine forces of wisdom, life, love, and untamed nature. At the very heart of Asgard's divine court is Frigg, the queen of the Aesir. Her name means beloved, and she is the wife of Odin and the mother of the radiant god Balder. Frigg is a figure of immense dignity and authority, the only one other than Odin who is permitted to sit on the high throne Hlidskjalf and gaze out over the 9 realms. Her primary domain is that of foresight, marriage, and motherhood. She is the protector of the home and the family, and women in labor would call upon her for aid. But her most significant power is her knowledge of fate. The sagas state that Frigg knows the destiny of all beings, yet she rarely speaks of what she knows. This makes her a figure of silent, profound wisdom, a counterpart to Odin's frantic, active quest for knowledge. While Odin seeks to learn the future, Frigg already knows it, and she bears the heavy burden of that knowledge in silence. This is most poignantly illustrated in the story of her son Balder. When Balder is tormented by dreams of his own death, Frigg does not passively accept fate. She acts. She travels the world and extracts an oath
from every single thing not to harm her son. It is a monumental effort, a mother's desperate attempt to defy prophecy. Her plan is nearly perfect, thwarted only by Loki's cunning discovery of the one thing she overlooked, the mistletoe. Her grief at Baldur's death is absolute, a sorrow that darkens all of Asgard and sets the stage for the final, tragic unraveling of the world. Frigg embodies the majesty, love, and deep sorrow of a queen who can see the doom of her own family but is powerless to prevent it. Another of the most vital goddesses in Asgard is Idun, whose name is connected to the concept of rejuvenation and youth. Idun is the keeper of a sacred ashwood box filled with magical apples. These are not ordinary apples, they are the fruit of immortality. When the gods feel old age creeping upon them, they eat one of Idun's apples and are instantly restored to their youth and vigor. Idun and her apples are, therefore, absolutely essential to the gods' power and continued existence. They are not inherently immortal. Their longevity is a gift that must be actively maintained by this gentle goddess. Her importance is made terrifyingly clear in one of the most famous myths. The trickster Loki, under duress from the giant Thjazi, lures Idun out of Asgard and into a forest, where the giant in the form of a great eagle swoops down and carries her away to his fortress in Jotunheim. Without Idun and her apples, the gods immediately begin to age. Their hair turns gray, their skin wrinkles, and their strength fails them. Asgard becomes a grim, withered place on the verge of collapse. The gods, realizing Loki is to blame, threaten him with a painful death unless he rescues her. Borrowing Freya's falcon cloak, Loki flies to Jotunheim, transforms the captive Idun into a nut, and carries her back in his talons, with the furious giant Thjazi in hot pursuit. The ensuing chase back to Asgard is a desperate flight for survival, and only a last-minute plan by the other gods saves them. This story underscores a crucial fact. The power and vitality of Asgard are fragile, dependent on the goddess of youth. Her abduction represents a near-fatal blow to the divine order. Not all of Asgard's goddesses fit the mold of queen or gentle nurturer. A powerful and fiercely independent figure who joined the Aesir from the world of giants is Skadi, the she-goddess. Skadi is the daughter of Thjazi, the very one who abducted Idun. After the gods kill her father, Skadi, filled with grief and rage, dons her armor, takes up her weapons, and marches alone to the gates of Asgard, demanding retribution. She is a formidable sight, a warrior giantess seeking justice. The gods, impressed by her courage and wishing to avoid further conflict, offer her compensation instead of battle. First, Odin takes her father's eyes and throws them into the sky to become 2 stars. Second, they offer her a husband from among the gods, but with a catch. She must choose him by looking only at his feet. Hoping to choose the beautiful Balder, she selects the most handsome pair of feet, believing they must belong to him. Instead, she finds she has chosen the Vanir sea god, Njord. The third part of her compensation is that the gods must make her laugh, something she thought impossible in her grief. It is Loki who succeeds, by tying one end of a rope to a goat and the other end to his own testicles and engaging in a ridiculous, painful tug-of-war that finally makes her laugh. Her marriage to Njord is a mismatch from the start. Skadi is a goddess of the mountains, a huntress who loves the howl of the wolves and the stark, snowy peaks of her homeland. Njord is a god of the sea, who loves the cry of the gulls and the sound of the waves. They try to compromise, spending 9 nights in his seaside home of Nodawin and 9 nights in her mountain fortress of Thrymheim, but they cannot be happy. Skadi complains she cannot sleep for the screaming of the seagulls, and Njord complains that the howling of the wolves in the mountains is unbearable. They eventually separate, and Skadi returns to her beloved mountains, where she spends her time hunting on skis with her bow and arrow. Skadi represents the untamed wilderness, a fierce independence, and the integration of a powerful, wild giant force into the Asgardian pantheon. She bows to no one, compromising little, and remains true to her own rugged nature. These three, Frigg, the wise queen, Idun, the life-giver, and Skadi, the wild huntress, show the diversity and importance of the Asinjor. They are not footnotes in the stories of male gods. They are central figures whose actions, knowledge, and very presence are critical to the survival, stability, and character of the Norse cosmos.
Dwarves and elves, mystical craftsmen and light beings. Beyond the realms of gods and giants, the Norse cosmos is populated by other races of mystical, semi-divine beings who play crucial, though often hidden, roles in the great cosmic drama. Chief among these are the dwarves, the subterranean master smiths, and the elves, the enigmatic beings of light and shadow. These races are not central actors in the same way as Odin or Thor, but the world could not exist without them. They are the creators of legendary artifacts, the guardians of ancient knowledge, and the very embodiment of the magical forces of earth and air. The dwarves, or dvergar, dwell in the dark, cavernous realm of Svartalfheim, the land of the Black Elves. Their origin is strange and primal. According to the Prose Edda, the dwarves came into being as maggots writhing in the flesh of the dead primordial giant Ymir. The gods, seeing their potential, gave them human intelligence and form, but bound them to the deep places of the earth. They are beings of stone and metal, miners and smiths without equal. They are often depicted as short, stout, bearded, and immensely strong, but their true power lies in their unparalleled skill at craftsmanship. The dwarves are the great artisans of the 9 realms. It is from their forges, deep within the mountains, that almost every legendary treasure of the gods emerges. They are masters of an alchemy that can weave magic into metal, creating items of impossible power and beauty. When Loki mischievously cut off Sif's hair, it was the dwarves he turned to. The sons of Ivaldi not only created a new head of hair from pure, growing gold, but also forged the magical ship Skidblapnir for Freyr and Odin's unerring spear Gungnir. In a contest with another pair of dwarven brothers, Brokar and his brother Eitri or Sindri, even more legendary items were created. To win a wager against Loki, Brokar and Eitri forged 3 masterpieces. The first was the golden-bristled boar Gullinborsti for Freyr. The second was the golden ring Draupnir for Odin, a ring that would magically produce 8 identical rings every 9th night, a symbol of endless wealth. Their third and greatest creation, despite a flaw caused by Loki's meddling, was the hammer Mjolnir, which they presented to Thor. This hammer would become the ultimate defense of Asgard. The dwarves also forged Freya's coveted necklace, the Brisingmane, and the magical chain Gleipnir, the only thing strong enough to bind the monstrous wolf Fenrir, fashioned from impossible ingredients like the sound of a cat's footfall and the breath of a fish. Despite their vital contributions, the dwarves' relationship with the gods is often strained. They are frequently portrayed as greedy, jealous, and cantankerous. They guard their treasures and their secret knowledge fiercely. Stories abound of them being tricked or coerced by the gods, particularly Loki, into giving up their creations. The dwarf Andvari was forced by Loki to surrender his treasure and a magical ring, which he then cursed. A curse that would later bring about the tragic downfall of the hero Sigurd and his entire family.
Another tale tells of two dwarven brothers, Fjalar and Galar, who murdered the wise being Kvasir and brewed his blood with honey to create the mead of poetry. This precious mead was later stolen from them by the giant Sutung, and then from him by Odin. The dwarves represent the immense creative and wealthy power hidden within the earth, but also the dangers of greed and isolation. They are essential to the gods' power, yet they are not their friends. They are a force of creation that operates by its own rules, deep in the darkness, forging the very tools that will shape the fate of the worlds above. In stark contrast to the subterranean, industrious dwarves are the elves, or Alfar. The lore speaks of two distinct kinds of elves, creating a duality of light and shadow. The first are the light elves, the Ljos Alfar, who dwell in the beautiful realm of Alfheim, located high in the heavens near Asgard. Alfheim is ruled by the Vanir god Freyr, a fitting lord for a realm of beauty and growth. The light elves are described in the Prose Edda as being fairer than the sun to look upon. They are associated with the sky, the air, light, beauty, and the arts. Their nature is benevolent and ethereal, and they seem to represent a higher, more spiritual form of existence. While few specific stories about the light elves survive, their presence suggests a world filled with a subtle, graceful magic, a force of inspiration and beauty that stands in contrast to the brute force of giants or the industrious craft of dwarves. Their counterparts are the dark elves, the Dokkalfar, or Svartalfar, black elves. They are said to live deep within the earth and are described as being blacker than pitch. The line between dark elves and dwarves is often blurred in the sources, with Svartalfheim being the home of both. It's possible that dark elf was another name for a dwarf, or that they were a closely related chthonic race. They embody the secret, hidden aspects of the earth, just as the light elves embody the radiant qualities of the sky. The Norse people had a complex relationship with the elves. They were seen as powerful beings who could bring either blessings or sickness. A special ceremony, the Alfablot, or elf sacrifice, was held in late autumn on homesteads, particularly by the lady of the house. It was a private, local ritual intended to honor the elves and gain their favor for the health and prosperity of the family. This suggests a belief in elves as local land spirits, ancestral spirits, or forces of nature whose goodwill was essential for a good life. An elf who was slighted could cause illness, and certain afflictions were known as elf-shot, believed to be caused by invisible arrows fired by malicious elves. Together, the dwarves and elves add a crucial layer of depth and magic to the Norse cosmos. The dwarves are the master artisans, the gritty, pragmatic creators whose work is indispensable, but whose motives are often selfish. They are the power of the earth, forged into tangible, magical objects. The elves are the spirits of light and shadow, forces of nature and inspiration who represent the unseen magical world that coexists alongside the world of humans. Without the dwarves, the gods would be unarmed. Without the elves, the world would be bereft of a subtle, graceful beauty. Both races, in their own way, show that the 9 realms are far more mystical and complex than a simple battle between gods and giants.
The runes and Norse magic, symbols of power and prophecy. In the world of the Norse, power was not limited to the strength of one's arm or the sharpness of one's blade. There was a deeper, more ancient power woven into the fabric of reality itself, a power that could be understood and wielded by those with the will to grasp it. This power was found in magic. Norse magic was not a simple matter of incantations and gestures. It was a complex and often perilous art, deeply connected to knowledge,
fate, and sacrifice. Central to this mystical worldview were the runes, the sacred symbols that were not just an alphabet, but a key to unlocking the very secrets of the cosmos. The runes are the most tangible form of Norse magic left to us. The most common runic alphabet is known as the Elder Futhark, named after its first 6 letters, F, U, T, H, A, R, K. To the Norse people, these symbols were not a mere human invention. They were cosmic forces in and of themselves, discovered in a moment of profound suffering and sacrifice by the god Odin. As told in the epic poem Havamal, the All-Father in his relentless quest for knowledge hung himself from a branch of the world tree, Yggdrasil, for 9 days and 9 nights. Wounded by his own spear, without food or drink, he peered into the abyss between life and death. In this ecstatic, agonizing state, the runes revealed themselves to him. He took them up with a cry, falling from the tree, reborn with the mastery of these potent symbols. This origin story is critical. It tells us that runic knowledge is not free. It is powerful, and therefore it is dangerous. It must be paid for with sacrifice. Each rune had a name and a phonetic value, but more importantly, it held a specific concept or power. The rune Fehu, or F, represented cattle and wealth. Thurisaz, or TH, represented the giants, a force of chaos or defense. Ansus, or A, was the rune of the Aesir gods, of divine wisdom and communication. Reido, or R, was the journey, both physical and spiritual. To carve a rune was not simply to write a letter, it was to invoke the power inherent within that symbol. A master of the runes, a rune master, could use them for a variety of magical purposes. Runes could be carved onto weapons to grant them strength and accuracy in battle. They could be inscribed on amulets for protection, luck, or love. They could be used for healing, carved onto a drinking horn to protect against poison, or placed on the hands of a midwife to ensure a safe birth. But they could also be used for darker purposes. Curses could be laid, storms could be raised, and enemies could be bound by the malicious carving of bitter runes. The saga of Egil Skallagrimsson, a famous Viking poet and warrior, tells of him discovering a poisoned horn intended for him. He carved runes onto it, smeared them with his own blood, and the horn shattered, saving his life. In another instance, he used runes to raise a scorn pole, a powerful curse against the king and queen who had wronged him. Beyond these practical applications, the runes were a tool for divination. By casting carved pieces of wood or bone and interpreting the runes that landed face up, a seer could gain insight into the hidden workings of fate, discerning the likely outcome of a future event. This was not about changing fate. The Norse concept of word or destiny was largely immutable, but about understanding one's path and how to best navigate it. While runic magic was a significant practice, it was not the only form of magic in the Norse world. Another, even more powerful and mysterious art was known as seidr. This was a form of shamanic magic primarily associated with the Vanir gods, and its greatest practitioner was the goddess Freyja, who taught it to Odin. Seidr was concerned with seeing into the future and, more controversially, manipulating the minds and fortunes of others. A practitioner of seidr, known as a volva, a seeress, or a seidmadur, a male practitioner, would enter a trance-like state, often by sitting on a high platform or seidhjal and chanting special songs called galdrar. In this state, their spirit could journey to other realms, communicate with spirits, and gain hidden knowledge. The most famous example of a seidr ritual is found in the poem Voluspa, the prophecy of the seeress. In it, the god Odin summons the spirit of a long-dead seeress to tell him of the past, present, and future.
culminating in the terrifying and detailed prophecy of Ragnarok. Seidr was considered an incredibly potent but also dangerous and somewhat taboo art. While it gave immense power over fate and fortune, it was also seen as manipulative and, for men, deeply shameful and unmanly. The act of receiving and channeling knowledge in a trance-like state was considered a passive female role, and male practitioners were often reviled, even as their power was sought. Odin, in his boundless quest for every form of knowledge, was willing to endure this shame to master Seidr, making him the ultimate magical authority, versed in both the manly art of runes and the unmanly art of Seidr. Other forms of magic also existed. Galder referred to the incantations and magical songs themselves, the verbal component of a ritual. There was also a belief in shape-shifting, with powerful individuals like Loki being able to change their form at will. Berserkers, the famed frenzied warriors, were thought to enter a state of animalistic fury, possibly a form of shamanic battle trance where they took on the spirit and strength of a bear or a wolf. Magic in the Norse world, therefore, was not the whimsical, wand-waving sorcery of modern fantasy. It was a serious, often grim, and deeply integrated part of the cosmic order. It was a tool for understanding a world governed by an inescapable fate, for protecting oneself against the chaotic forces that threatened at every turn, and for gaining power in a world where knowledge and will were the ultimate weapons. The runes were its language, Seidr was its most profound expression, and Odin was its greatest, most self-sacrificing master. It was a power born of suffering, and it often led to more of the same.
Legendary weapons and artifacts: Mjolnir, Gungnir, and the Brísingamen. The power of the Norse gods was not solely inherent, it was often magnified and defined by the legendary weapons and artifacts they wielded. These were no ordinary objects. Forged in the magical fires of the dwarven realm, Svartalfheim, or imbued with cosmic significance, these treasures were extensions of the gods themselves. They were symbols of their authority, tools of their power, and in some cases, the very instruments of their doom. From the mightiest war hammer to the most beautiful necklace, these artifacts are central to the epic tales of Asgard. Without question, the most iconic artifact in all of Norse mythology is Mjolnir, the war hammer of Thor. Its name, meaning crusher or grinder, barely does justice to its power. Forged by the dwarf brothers Brokr and Itri, its creation was a masterpiece of smithing, marred only by the meddling of Loki, whose pestering in the form of a fly caused the handle to be slightly too short. This flaw, however, did nothing to diminish its incredible might. Mjolnir was the ultimate weapon against chaos. It was indestructible, and when thrown, it would unerringly strike its target before flying back to its wielder's hand. With it, Thor could level mountains, slay giants by the dozen, and summon lightning and thunder from the heavens. But Mjolnir was more than a weapon of war. It was also a sacred tool of order and consecration. Its power was used to hallow and bless. It sanctified weddings, ensuring fertility and prosperity for the new couple. It was used to bless newborn children, bringing them into the community. It could even bring the dead back to life, as Thor did with his goats each morning after eating them. Mjolnir was the physical embodiment of Thor's role as the protector of both gods and humanity, a symbol of divine order pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Its loss was unthinkable, as seen when the giant Thrym stole it, bringing Asgard to the brink of disaster, until Thor, in a humiliating but necessary ruse, retrieved it. The hammer is so central to Thor's identity that it is almost a part of him, an extension of his will and strength.
If Mjolnir is the symbol of raw power, then Gungnir, the spear of Odin, is the symbol of strategic authority and unwavering purpose. Also forged by the dwarves, the sons of Ivaldi, Gungnir was a spear enchanted to never miss its mark. Its name means swaying one, but its true significance lies in its connection to Odin's domains, war, death, and sacrifice. When Odin initiated the great Aesir-Vanir war, he hurled his spear over the heads of the Vanir army and declared, "Odin owns you all." This act became a ritual, and Norse warriors would often do the same before a battle, dedicating the slain to the Allfather. Gungnir is also the instrument of Odin's own supreme sacrifice. It was with this spear that he wounded himself before hanging on Yggdrasil to learn the runes. The spear is thus a tool of both outward declaration and inward transformation. It is not a blunt instrument like Mjolnir. It is a precise, binding weapon, a symbol of a king's decree and a mystic's will. It represents the binding power of an oath and the targeted, inescapable nature of Odin's judgment. While weapons of war dominate many tales, some of the most powerful artifacts were objects of beauty and prosperity. The most famous of these is the Brisingamen, the magnificent necklace of the goddess Freya. The name likely means gleaming necklace or fiery necklace. It was forged by 4 master dwarf smiths, Alfrig, Dvalin, Berling, and Grer. Freya coveted the necklace the moment she saw it, but the dwarves would not sell it for any amount of gold or silver. The only price they would accept was that she spent one night with each of them. Freya, a goddess in full command of her own power and desire, agreed to their terms and claimed the breathtaking necklace. The Brisingamen is the ultimate symbol of Freya's domains: love, beauty, wealth, and sensual power. It shone so brightly that it enhanced her already divine beauty, but it was also a source of conflict. The trickster Loki, ever the agent of chaos, discovered how she had obtained the necklace and, in the form of a fly, snuck into her chambers to steal it for Odin. The subsequent quest to retrieve it involved the god Heimdall battling Loki in the form of seals, highlighting the immense value of the necklace. The Brisingamen represents the irresistible allure of beauty and the conflicts that such desire can provoke. Other significant artifacts abound. The god Freyr, a deity of peace and fertility, possessed 2 remarkable treasures. His first was his ship, Skidbladnir, a vessel large enough for all the gods, but magically collapsible to fit in a pocket. It always had a fair wind, symbolizing the boundless prosperity of the Vanir. His second, and more tragic treasure, was his self-fighting sword. In his desperate love for the giantess Gerðr, Freyr gave this sword to his servant Skirnir as a reward for wooing her. This act of romantic sacrifice would prove fatal, as Freyr is destined to face the fire giant Surtur at Ragnarok and fall in battle. Odin himself possessed another treasure of prosperity, the ring Draupnir, the Dripper. Forged by Brokkr and Eitri alongside Mjolnir, this golden ring had the ability to magically create 8 identical gold rings of equal weight every 9th night. It was a source of endless wealth, a symbol of divine kingship and generosity. Odin placed this ring on the funeral pyre of his son Balder as a final gift, a gesture of infinite love. The ring was later retrieved from the underworld, becoming a symbol of rebirth and the cyclical nature of life and wealth. These artifacts are not mere props in the mythological stories. They are deeply woven into the identity and fate of their wielders,
Thor without Mjolnir is diminished. Odin's authority is symbolized by Gungnir. Freya's allure is magnified by the Brising Amen. These items, born from the earth's deepest secrets and forged with magic, represent the tangible connection between the gods and the cosmic forces they command. They are the instruments of creation, the weapons of war, and the heavy price of destiny.
Norse mythological creatures: Fenrir, Jormungandr, Sleipnir, and more. The 9 realms of the Norse cosmos teem with a vast and varied bestiary of mythological creatures. These are not mere animals. They are beings of immense power, symbolic weight, and often prophetic destiny. From the monstrous children of a trickster god to the divine steeds of the Aesir, these creatures are active participants in the cosmic saga, serving as allies, adversaries, and agents of fate itself. Their stories reveal the wild, untamable, and magical nature of the Norse universe. At the dark heart of this menagerie are the 3 monstrous offspring of Loki and the giantess Angrboda, the bringer of grief. These 3 children were so terrifying and so clearly destined for evil that the gods of Asgard knew they had to be contained. The first was the great wolf Fenrir. From birth, Fenrir was a creature of ravenous hunger and terrifying power, growing at an impossible rate. The gods, seeing the prophecy that he would one day bring about Odin's doom, attempted to bind him. Twice they chained him with the mightiest fetters they could forge, and twice Fenrir shattered them with ease. Realizing that conventional strength was useless, the gods commissioned the dwarves of Svartalfheim to create a magical binding. The result was Gleipnir, a ribbon as thin as silk, but forged from 6 impossible ingredients: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. To trick the now suspicious wolf into being bound by this ribbon, the god Tyr placed his own hand in Fenrir's mouth as a pledge of good faith. When Fenrir found he could not break Gleipnir, he snapped his jaws shut, biting off Tyr's hand. The gods then dragged the howling wolf to a remote island, wedged a sword in his mouth to keep it open, and left him there. Fenrir now lies bound, drool from his gaping maw forming the river Van, expectation, as he awaits the day of Ragnarok, when his bonds will snap and he will be free to devour the sun and consume the Allfather, Odin. The second child of Loki was Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Deemed too dangerous to be kept in Asgard, Odin cast the serpent into the great ocean that encircles the world of men, Midgard. There, Jormungandr grew to such an impossibly colossal size that he could encircle the entire world and bite his own tail. He became the world serpent, a dormant but ever-present symbol of the destructive chaos that surrounds the ordered world. His arch-nemesis is the god Thor, and their encounters shake the very foundations of the cosmos. Their first major confrontation occurs on Thor's legendary fishing trip, where Thor nearly hauls the serpent from the sea before his giant companion cuts the line. Jormungandr represents the inescapable, cyclical nature of the world and the primal chaos of the sea. At Ragnarok, he will rise from the ocean, spewing venom to poison the sky and the sea, to face Thor in a final, mutually destructive battle. Loki's third child was a daughter named Hel. The gods cast her down into the primordial realm of Niflheim, where she became the ruler of the underworld, Helheim, the destination for all who did not die a glorious death in battle. Hel is a grim figure, her body depicted as being half a beautiful living woman and half a blue-black rotting corpse.
She reigns over a dismal kingdom of the dead, surrounded by the river Gjöll and guarded by the hellhound Garmr. Her power is absolute in her own realm, so much so that when the beloved god Balder is killed, even Odin cannot force her to release him. Hell represents the inevitable reality of death, decay, and the gloomy finality that awaits most beings. Not all mythological creatures were monstrous, however. The gods themselves relied on a number of remarkable animal companions. The most famous of these is Sleipnir, Odin's magnificent eight-legged steed. Sleipnir was another of Loki's strange offspring, conceived when Loki shapeshifted into a mare to distract the giant builder's stallion Svadilfari. The resulting foal was the fastest and finest of all horses, able to gallop across land, sea, and sky, and even to ferry its rider to and from the realm of the dead. Sleipnir is the ultimate shamanic mount, the vehicle that carries the Allfather on his journeys through the 9 realms in his quest for knowledge. Odin was also famously accompanied by 2 ravens, Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory. Every morning they would fly from his shoulders and traverse the entire world, returning at dusk to whisper all that they had seen and heard into his ear. They were Odin's spies, his extensions of consciousness, symbolizing his omniscience and his deep anxiety about the state of the cosmos. He also had 2 wolves, Geri and Friki, both names meaning the ravenous, who sat at his feet in Valhalla, and to whom he fed all his food. Other gods had their own sacred creatures. Thor's chariot was pulled by 2 goats, Tungrisnir and Tungnjostra, who could be eaten for supper and resurrected the next day. Freya's chariot was drawn by 2 large cats, representing her dual nature of fierce independence and loving sensuality. Freyr had his golden-bristled boar, Gullinbursti, a radiant symbol of fertility and the sun. And the world tree Yggdrasil was a complete ecosystem of its own, home to the eagle Vidrfolnir, the squirrel Ratatosk, 4 stags, and the dragon Nidhígg, who gnawed at its roots. The mythology is rich with dragons, like Fafnir, a dwarf transformed by greed, who guarded a cursed treasure hoard until he was slain by the hero Sigurd. These creatures are essential threads in the Norse mythological tapestry. They are living symbols of chaos, order, knowledge, and destruction. They are the instruments of fate, the companions of the gods, and the nightmares of humanity. Their actions are not incidental. They are prophesized, and their final bloody roles in the drama of Ragnarok are as fixed and as tragic as those of the gods they serve or seek to destroy.
The heroes of Midgard, Sigurd, Brynhild, and the Volsunga saga. While the grand cosmic drama of the gods in Asgard and the giants in Jotunheim forms the backbone of Norse mythology, there is another cycle of heroic tales that plays out in the realm of humanity, Midgard. These are the heroic legends, sagas filled with mortal kings, warrior poets, and shield maidens whose lives are nonetheless deeply intertwined with the will of the gods, the curses of dwarves, and the inescapable web of fate. The most famous and far-reaching of these is the Volsunga saga, the tragic and bloody tale of the Volsung clan and its greatest hero, Sigurd, the Dragon Slayer. The saga begins with the ancestors of Sigurd, tracing a lineage marked by divine intervention and brutal tragedy. The patriarch of the clan, Volsung, was a king so favored by Odin that the god himself appeared at a wedding feast in his hall. Disguised as a one-eyed stranger, Odin strode to the great tree that grew in the center of the hall, the Barnstalker, and plunged a magnificent sword deep into its trunk. He declared that whoever could pull the sword from the tree would have it as a gift. All the mightiest warriors tried and failed. Only Sigmund, Volsung's youngest son, was able to draw the sword, which was named Grom. This sword would become the legendary weapon of his family line. Sigmund's life was one of constant warfare and sorrow. His sister, Signy, was married off to a cruel Gothic king who ambushed and killed King Volsung and all his sons, except for Sigmund. Signy, bent on revenge, preserved her brother's life, and in a desperate and shocking act of incest, disguised herself and conceived a son with her brother, Sinfiotli, who was born with the pure, fierce blood of the Volsungs. Together, Sigmund and Sinfiotli eventually avenged their family, burning the Gothic king in his own hall, though Signy chose to die in the flames with her hated husband. Years later, in his old age, Sigmund fought his final battle. Odin himself appeared on the battlefield and shattered the sword Grom with his spear Gungnir. As Sigmund lay dying, he instructed Hjordis to gather the fragments of the sword, prophesying that she was pregnant with a son who would one day reforge it and win great fame. That son was Sigurd. Raised in the court of a Danish king, Sigurd grew into a young man of unparalleled strength and courage. His foster father was the cunning smith, Regin, who was secretly the brother of a dragon named Fafnir. Regin told Sigurd the story of his family's cursed treasure, originally belonging to the dwarf Andvari. The hoard, which included a magical ring called Andvaranaut, was taken by Loki to pay a ransom to the family of Regin and Fafnir after Loki had killed their brother. Andvari cursed the gold, and especially the ring, declaring that it would bring death and ruin to whoever possessed it. Fafnir, consumed by greed, murdered his own father to claim the hoard and transformed himself into a fearsome dragon to guard it. Regin, desiring the gold for himself, urged Sigurd to slay the dragon. He reforged the fragments of Sigmund's sword, Grom, into a new, flawless blade, so sharp it could slice through an anvil. Guided by advice from a disguised Odin, Sigurd dug a pit on the path Fafnir took to water. As the dragon crawled over the pit, Sigurd thrust the sword Grom upwards, deep into the creature's soft underbelly, killing him. As Fafnir died, he warned Sigurd of the gold's curse. Sigurd was then instructed by Regin to roast the dragon's heart. While doing so, he burned his thumb and put it in his mouth to cool it. A taste of the dragon's blood instantly gave him the ability to understand the language of birds. The birds nesting nearby warned him that Regin was planning to betray him and kill him to keep the treasure for himself. Heeding the warning, Sigurd preemptively killed Regin, claimed the entire cursed hoard, and took the ring Andvaranaut. Riding away, Sigurd came upon a remote mountaintop surrounded by a wall of fire. He rode his valiant horse Grani through the flames and found a warrior sleeping in full armor. When he removed the helmet, he found not a man, but a beautiful woman. This was the Valkyrie, Brynhild. Odin had punished her for disobeying him in a battle by placing her in a magical sleep, to be awakened only by a hero who knew no fear. Sigurd and Brynhild fell deeply in love and pledged to marry one another, sealing their oath with the exchange of rings. He gave her the cursed ring, Andvaranaut. However, fate and magic conspired against them. Sigurd traveled to the kingdom of the Gjukungs, where he was befriended by the king's sons, Gunnar and Hugni. Their mother,
the sorceress Grimhild, saw Sigurd as a great match for her own daughter, Gudrun, and a powerful ally for her sons. She gave Sigurd a potion of forgetfulness, which made him completely forget his love for Brynhild. Under the spell's influence, he married Gudrun. Later, the sorceress decided that the powerful Brynhild would be the perfect wife for her son Gunnar. But Gunnar could not ride through the wall of fire to reach her. So, using magic, Sigurd and Gunnar switched appearances. Sigurd, disguised as Gunnar, once again rode through the flames, overcame Brynhild, and claimed her as a bride for the real Gunnar. During the 3 nights he stayed with her, he lay his bare sword between them in the bed, a symbol that he remained faithful to his own wife, Gudrun. He took back the ring Andvarineut and gave her another. When the deception was eventually revealed, Brynhild's love for Sigurd turned into a burning, vengeful fury. She felt utterly betrayed, tricked into marrying a lesser man, while the hero she loved was married to another. Torn between her lingering love and her wounded pride, she manipulated her husband Gunnar into ordering Sigurd's death, threatening him that she would leave him if he did not avenge her honor. Gunnar and his brother Hogni, bound by oaths not to harm Sigurd themselves, incited their younger brother Gutthorm to do the deed. Gutthorm crept into Sigurd's bedchamber and stabbed the sleeping hero. Sigurd, mortally wounded, threw his sword Grom after his killer, slicing him in 2. As he lay dying, Sigurd told Gudrun the truth of the deception, and his love for Brynhild returned as the magic faded. Brynhild, upon seeing the dead hero, was overcome with grief. Her vengeance had brought her no peace, only the death of the one man she had ever truly loved. She ordered a great funeral pyre to be built for Sigurd. Then, taking up a sword, she killed herself, asking to be placed on the pyre beside him, so that they could finally be united in death as they could not in life. The saga does not end there. The cursed gold continues to bring tragedy to Gudrun and her family for generations. The story of Sigurd and Brynhild is a profoundly human tragedy of love, betrayal, and honor, set against a mythological backdrop. A stark lesson that even the greatest heroes cannot escape the curse of greed or the cruel machinations of fate.
Tales of trickery and conflict. The mischiefs of Loki. The mythology of the Norse is not just a grand linear story of creation and destruction. It is a rich tapestry woven with countless smaller tales of adventure, conflict, humor, and peril. These stories flesh out the characters of the gods and illustrate the constant tensions that define their world. And at the center of so many of these disruptive, chaotic, and often transformative events is the enigmatic trickster, Loki. His schemes and mischiefs serve as the catalysts for some of the most memorable stories, pushing the gods to their limits and often changing the very landscape of their reality. One of the earliest and most consequential of Loki's pranks was the affair of Sif's hair. In a fit of pure, pointless malice, Loki snuck into the bedchamber of Thor's wife, the beautiful goddess Sif, and sheared off her magnificent, long golden hair, which was said to be like a field of living wheat. When Thor discovered this, his rage was volcanic. He seized Loki, threatening to shatter every bone in his body. The terrified Loki swore he would find a replacement for Sif's hair, one even more beautiful than that which was lost. This sent Loki on a desperate mission to Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves. There, Loki's cunning turned a personal crisis into a cosmic boon. He approached 2 sets of master craftsmen, the sons of Ivaldi and the brothers Brokkr and Eitri, and pit them against each other. He wagered his own head that Brokkr and Eitri could not create treasures more magnificent than those of their rivals. The sons of Ivaldi promptly forged 3 masterpieces: the magical golden hair for Sif that would grow like real hair, the ship Skidbladnir that could be folded into a pocket, and the unerring spear Gungnir. Not to be outdone, Brokkr and Eitri began their own work. Loki, desperate to win his bet, transformed into a fly and repeatedly bit the smiths to distract them. Despite his interference, they produced 3 treasures of their own: the golden boar Gulenborsti, the magic ring Draupnir, and their ultimate creation, the hammer Mjolnir. Though Mjolnir's sandal was short due to Loki's pestering, the gods declared it the greatest treasure of all, and Loki lost his bet. He only saved his head through a clever bit of wordplay, arguing that the dwarves had a right to his head, but not his neck. As a punishment, they sewed his mouth shut. This story is pure Loki. His selfish, destructive act inadvertently leads to the creation of the gods' most powerful and defining artifacts. Another tale reveals Loki's role as a companion and a troublemaker on Thor's journeys. This is the story of Thor's journey to Utgard. Thor, accompanied by Loki and his human servant, Thjalfi, traveled to the giants' realm of Jotunheim. They arrived at a massive fortress called Utgard, ruled by the cunning giant king Utgard the Loki. The king, seeing his divine guests, mocked their seemingly small stature and challenged them to a series of contests. Here, Loki's own particular brand of mischief, his gluttony, was put to the test. He was challenged to an eating contest against a giant named Logi. A long trough of meat was placed between them, and they ate from opposite ends. Loki ate with incredible speed, but Logi not only ate the meat, but also the bones and the wooden trough itself. Loki was soundly defeated. Later, it was revealed that the entire series of contests was an illusion. The giant Logi was not a person, but wildfire itself, an elemental force that consumes everything. While Loki was defeated, it highlights his nature as a consumer, a being of appetites, yet one who is ultimately outmatched by the raw, primordial forces of the cosmos. In this adventure, Loki is not the primary antagonist, but a supporting character whose own brand of chaos is dwarfed by the grander deceptions of the giants. Perhaps the most dramatic tale of Loki's treachery before the death of Balder is the abduction of Idun. The gods Odin, Hoenir, and Loki were traveling when they were captured by the giant Thjazi, who appeared in the form of a massive eagle. Thjazi refused to release them until Loki promised to lure the goddess Idun and her magical apples of youth out of Asgard. Faced with his own demise, Loki agreed. He returned to Asgard and lied to Idun, telling her he had found apples in a nearby forest that were even more magnificent than her own, and that she should bring hers for comparison. The trusting goddess followed him out of Asgard's protective walls, where Thjazi swooped down and carried her off to his mountain stronghold. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Without their supply of rejuvenating apples, the gods began to wither in age. Their divine power faded, and a grim twilight fell over Asgard. Realizing Loki was the cause, the enraged gods seized him and threatened him with a slow, torturous death. Once again, Loki was forced to clean up his own mess. Borrowing Freya's falcon cloak, he flew to Thjazi's fortress, used magic to transform Idun into a nut, and began the perilous flight back to Asgard, with the furious giant in hot pursuit. The aged gods on Asgard's wall saw them coming, and quickly built a massive fire. As Loki the falcon shot over the wall, the gods ignited the flames, and Thjazi, flying too fast to stop, was engulfed in the fire, and the gods killed him as he fell. This tale showcases Loki at his most dangerous. His self-serving liar, whose actions nearly bring about the ruin of the gods, saved only by his own cleverness under duress. These stories, and many others like them, paint a picture of a being that is essential to the dynamism of the Norse world. Loki is the fly in the ointment, the catalyst for change, the force that prevents stasis. His mischief forces the gods to be clever, to be strong, and to confront their own vulnerabilities. But each act of trickery, each lie, each betrayal deepens the shadow within him, pushing him further down the path from chaotic ally to malevolent enemy, a path that would culminate in the murder of a god and the unleashing of Ragnarok.
Ragnarok foretold, the prophecy of the end times. Woven throughout the grand tapestry of Norse mythology is a single, dark, and inescapable thread, the prophecy of Ragnarok. This is not merely a story of a final battle, it is the pre-written, unavoidable destiny of the gods and the entire cosmos. Ragnarok, often translated as Twilight of the Gods or Doom of the Powers, is the detailed, terrifying account of the world's end, an apocalypse foretold in vivid detail, most notably in the great prophetic poem, the Völuspá. It is a fate that the gods, for all their power, know is coming and cannot prevent. Their lives, their struggles, and their choices are all made in the shadow of this impending doom. The prophecy does not begin with a battle, but with a series of harrowing portents, signs that the world's order is unraveling. The first and most significant of these omens is the death of the god Balder the Beautiful. His murder at the hands of his blind brother Höður, instigated by the malice of Loki, is the act that breaks the divine peace. It is the first death among the Aesir in their celestial home, a tragic wound from which Asgard will never truly recover. This event signals that the Age of the Gods is coming to a close and sets in motion the final vengeful stages of Loki's journey. Following Balder's death, the cosmos will plunge into a period of moral and natural decay. A great and terrible winter, the Thimble Winter, will grip the world. 3 winters will follow one another with no summer between. The sun will grow dim and biting winds will sweep across endless snows. In Midgard, all bonds of kinship and law will dissolve. Brother will fight brother, fathers will kill sons, and the world of men will sink into an age of axe and sword, a wind age, a wolf age, ere the world sinks. This societal collapse is a mirror of the cosmic order breaking down. The signs will escalate in the heavens and the earth. The sky wolf Skull, who has chased the sun across the sky since the beginning of time, will finally catch and devour it. His brother, Hati, will swallow the moon, plunging the world into a great and terrifying darkness. The stars will vanish from the sky. The earth will begin to tremble with violent earthquakes, so powerful that mountains will crumble and every bond and fetter will be broken. This great shaking will be the moment of liberation for the forces of chaos. The monstrous wolf Fenrir, bound by the gods so long ago, will snap the magical ribbon Gleipnir and be set free, his jaws gaping so wide that the lower jaw scrapes the earth and the upper one touches the sky. He will rampage through the worlds, fire blazing from his eyes and nostrils. From the depths of the ocean, his brother, the Midgard serpent Jormungandr, will be stirred into a fury. He will rise from the sea and writhe onto the land, his massive coils thrashing and spewing venom that poisons the air and the water. From the underworld, Loki, his own bonds shattered by the earthquakes, will also be freed. His heart filled with black hatred, he will emerge to lead the armies of destruction. He will board the horrifying ship Naglfar, a vessel constructed entirely from the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of the dead, a chilling reminder of the importance of proper burial rites. With the giant Herm as its helmsman, Naglfar will set sail on the flood caused by the serpent's rising, carrying an army of frost giants towards the final battlefield. From the gloomy depths of Helheim, Loki's daughter, Hel, will also emerge, bringing with her the pale armies of the dishonorable dead and her guard dog, the hellhound Garmr. From the south,
the sky will split open, and from the fiery realm of Muspelheim will ride the fire giants, led by their colossal king, Surtur. Wielding a sword that burns brighter and hotter than the sun, Surtur will lead his flaming host across the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that connects Midgard to Asgard. Under the weight of this fiery onslaught, the beautiful Bifrost bridge will shatter and collapse, cutting off the gods' path of retreat. The warning of this final assembly will be sounded by the god Heimdall, the ever-watchful guardian of Asgard. Standing at the ruins of the Bifrost, he will raise his great horn Gjallarhorn and blow a blast so loud that it will be heard throughout all 9 realms. It is the final desperate call to arms. The world tree Yggdrasil will groan and tremble. Hearing the call, Odin will ride to the well of Mimir to take one last counsel from the wise head. He will then don his golden helmet, grasp his spear Gungnir, and lead the gods and his army of Einherjar, the champion warriors of Valhalla, out of the great gates and onto the vast plain of Vigrid, the prophesied site of the last battle. This is the prophecy in all its terrible detail. It is not a vague premonition, but a specific, step-by-step account of the apocalypse. What makes Ragnarok so compelling and so central to the Norse worldview is that the gods are not ignorant of it. Odin, through his endless quest for wisdom, knows every detail of what is to come. He knows which enemies his fellow gods will face, and he knows the outcome of each duel. He knows he is destined to die. Yet he does not flee or despair. The prophecy does not paralyze them, it gives them purpose. The foreknowledge of their doom defines their existence, transforming them from immortal, carefree deities into tragic heroes, fighting a battle they know they cannot win, not for victory, but for honor, duty, and the hope that something new might rise from the ashes of their world. The horns have sounded, the armies are gathering, and the twilight of the gods is at hand.
The death of the gods. Battles, sacrifices, and cosmic collapse. The call of Heimdall's horn, Gjallarhorn, echoes across the darkened, trembling cosmos. The age of prophecies and portents is over. The time for the final confrontation has arrived. On the plain of Vigrid, a battlefield said to be 100 leagues in every direction, the 2 great armies assemble for the last time. It is a moment of terrible, tragic grandeur. The forces of order stand against the overwhelming tide of chaos, not in hope of victory, but in fulfillment of their destiny. This is the battle of Ragnarok, the death of the gods. At the head of the divine army rides Odin, the All-Father. His golden helmet gleams in the dim, apocalyptic light. His 2 ravens and 2 wolves are gone, and he rides his 8-legged steed Sleipnir into the fray, his spear Gungnir held ready. He leads the magnificent Einherjar, the souls of the greatest human warriors who have feasted and trained in Valhalla for this very day. Alongside him are the great gods of Asgard. Thor, his eyes blazing with fury, clutching his hammer Mjolnir. Tyr, the one-handed god of law, now a grim warrior of vengeance. Freyr, the noble lord of the Vanir, his heart heavy but resolute. And the ever-vigilant Heimdall, his horn now replaced with his sword. Facing them is a nightmarish host. The frost giants of Jotunheim march in a vast, lumbering horde. From the sea, the world serpent Jormungandr slithers onto the battlefield, its venomous breath fouling the air. And at the forefront of the chaos are the 3 great catalysts of doom. The monstrous wolf Fenrir, his bonds broken and his hunger infinite. Loki, the arch-traitor, steering the ghastly ship Naglfar, a sneer of triumph on his face. And from the south,
the fire giant Surtur, his flaming sword ready to set the world ablaze. The battle begins with a series of fated one-on-one duels, each foretold by the Volva long ago. Odin, as the king of the gods, rides directly for his prophesied doom, the great wolf Fenrir. The battle between the Allfather and the monstrous son of Loki is fierce but brief. Despite all his wisdom, magic, and the might of his spear, Odin is overwhelmed by the wolf's sheer chaotic power. Fenrir opens his colossal jaws and swallows the king of the gods whole. The Allfather, the great seeker of knowledge, is the first of the major gods to fall, his lifelong struggle against fate ending in the belly of the beast. But Odin's death is not unavenged. His son, Vidar the Silent, a god of vengeance who has been waiting for this moment, strides forward to confront his father's killer. He wears a special shoe, one that has been crafted throughout the ages from the leather scraps that shoemakers have cut from the toes and heels of their own shoes. This magical, reinforced boot allows him to step into Fenrir's lower jaw, and with his immense strength, he grips the wolf's upper jaw and rips the monster's head apart, killing him. Vengeance is served, but the cost was the life of Asgard's king. The mighty Thor, protector of gods and men, does not see his father's fall. He is engaged in his own final epic struggle with his ancient nemesis, the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr. Their battle is cataclysmic, shaking the dying world. The thunder god and the world serpent trade mighty blows, a storm of hammer strikes against thrashing coils and venomous fangs. Finally, with a thunderous roar, Thor delivers a fatal blow with Mjolnir, crushing the serpent's skull. He is victorious. But as the colossal monster dies, it spews a final torrent of black venom, drenching the god of thunder. Thor staggers back 9 paces, a number of deep symbolic power in Norse lore, before the poison overwhelms him and he collapses, dead. The greatest champion of order has fallen, having rid the world of its great corrupting force, but at the cost of his own life. The beautiful Vanir god Freyr, lord of the harvest, faces the incandescent terror of the fire giant Surtur. He fights with courage and nobility, using a stag's antler as a weapon, for he gave away his magical, self-fighting sword long ago for the love of the giantess Gerdr. Without his destined weapon, he is no match for the primeval fire of Muspelheim. Surtur's flaming sword cuts him down. The god of peace and prosperity is consumed by the fire of destruction. The one-handed god of law Tyr finds himself face to face with the monstrous hellbound Garm, who is broken free from the gates of Helheim. In a savage battle of warrior against beast, they tear each other apart. Tyr slays the hound, but he is mortally wounded in the process and dies on the battlefield. The god of justice and the beast of the underworld nullify each other. And then there's the final personal duel between 2 beings who were once as close as brothers. Heimdall, the loyal guardian of Asgard, and Loki, the ultimate betrayer. Theirs is a fight born of ancient rivalry and deep hatred. They are perfectly matched in cunning and power, and they battle fiercely until they too inflict mortal wounds upon each other. The guardian and the trickster fall together, their death symbolizing the final collapse of the old order and the chaos that fueled it. With the deaths of Odin, Thor, Freyr, Tyr, Heimdall, and Loki, the battle is effectively over. The leaders of both sides are slain. But the end of the world is not yet complete. With the gods fallen and the field of Vigrid littered with the bodies of heroes and monsters, the fire giant Surtur fulfills his ultimate purpose. He brandishes his flaming sword and sweeps it across the entirety of creation. The fire consumes everything. The earth, the heavens, the halls of the gods, and the great world tree Yggdrasil itself are engulfed in a final cleansing inferno. The seas boil and rise, and the scorched earth sinks beneath the waves. The cosmos collapses back into the primordial state from which it emerged, a silent, smoking void. The 9 realms are no more. The gods are dead. The giants are destroyed. The stars have fallen. It is the ultimate end, a total cosmic reset. The grand, tragic saga has reached its prophesied conclusion. All that is left is darkness, silence, and the steaming sea. The cycle of creation, order, and destruction is complete.
The rebirth of the world, aftermath and renewal, post-Ragnarok. The fires of Surtur have died. The roiling seas have calmed. The deafening noise of the final battle has given way to a profound and total silence. The old world is gone, drowned and burned, returned to the primordial void. Ragnarok is complete. But in the Norse worldview, the end is never truly the end. Just as a forest fire clears the way for new growth, the destruction of the old cosmos was a necessary, cleansing cataclysm that makes way for a new, purer world to be born. The Voluspa, the prophecy that foretold the world's doom, also speaks of what comes after, a cycle of renewal, a green and beautiful world emerging from the ashes. The steaming waters, a new earth rises. It is green, fertile, and beautiful, more magnificent than the old world ever was. The fields yield their crops without any sowing, and the waters teem with fish. The sun, before being devoured by the wolf's skull, had given birth to a daughter, a new sun, just as bright and beautiful as her mother. This new sun now takes her place in the sky, warming the reborn world with a gentle, life-giving light. The darkness is banished, and a new dawn has arrived. This new world is not empty. A small handful of gods have survived the apocalypse, sheltered from Surtur's fire in a place called Hodmimis Holt, Hord Mimir's Wood. Among the survivors are Odin's sons, Vidar the Silent, who avenged his father, and Vali. More importantly, the sons of Thor, Magni, meaning mighty, and Modi, meaning wrath, also survive. They make their way to the plains of Idavolur, the shining plain, where Asgard once stood. There they find a precious relic of the old world, their father's hammer, Mjolnir. The symbol of order and protection has endured, and in the hands of Thor's sons it will be used not for war, but for hallowing and blessing this new world. Soon they are joined by another pair of survivors, returning from the land of the dead, Balder the Beautiful and his blind brother Hoder, whose accidental conflict triggered the beginning of the end, are released from Helheim. The underworld could not hold them past the world's destruction. Their return is profoundly symbolic. Balder, the god of light and innocence, and Hoder, the agent of his unintentional death, are now reconciled. The great crime that poisoned the old world is healed, and the two brothers can now live together in peace. This new pantheon is one of forgiveness and reconciliation, free from the old grudges and fatal pride that doomed their predecessors. As the new gods sit together on the green grass of Idavolur, they begin to speak of the past, of the great events and the secret runes of the former world. And there, in the grass, they discover a treasure from the Age of Gods, a set of golden plain pieces, the very ones the Aesir used in their halls at the dawn of their reign. Finding these pieces symbolizes a continuity with the past, but also a chance to play the game anew, this time perhaps without the fatal flaws that led to their destruction. The world of humanity is also reborn. 2 humans, a man named Leif, meaning life, and a woman named Leif Trasir, meaning striver after life or will to live, survived the apocalypse by hiding deep in the wood of the world tree Yggdrasil, nourished only by the morning dew. They emerge from their shelter into the new fertile world. From this single pair, a new race of humanity will spring forth, destined to populate the earth. This new humanity will live in a world free from the old wars, sorrows, and moral decay that plagued the final days of the old world. The nature of the afterlife is also transformed. The old halls of Valhalla and Helheim are gone. In their place, the prophecy speaks of new dwellings. For the righteous, there is a golden-roofed hall called Gimle, a place more beautiful than the sun, where virtuous souls will live in eternal pleasure and peace. It is a heaven free from the martial purpose of Valhalla. Its residents are not training for war, but simply enjoying a state of bliss. For the wicked, the murderers, the adulterers, and the oath-breakers, there is a grim alternative. On a distant, sunless shore stands a hall called Nastrand, the corpse shore. Its doors face north, and its walls are woven from the backs of living snakes, their heads turned inward, dripping venom into the hall below. Here, the souls of the wicked are forced to wade through the rivers of venom. This new cosmology presents a more defined moral dualism than the old world, a clear separation of good and evil, reward and punishment. Some interpretations of the prophecy speak of a final, mysterious event, the arrival of a mighty one from above who rules over everything. Some scholars have interpreted this as a later addition, a reflection of the Christianization of the Norse world, inserting a monotheistic, all-powerful God into the pagan cosmology. Others see it as a native concept, a new, supreme principle of order emerging to govern this reborn universe. The rebirth of the world after Ragnarok is a powerful and optimistic conclusion to the Norse saga. It transforms the story from a purely nihilistic tragedy into a cyclical epic of death and renewal. The doom of the gods was not a meaningless end, but a necessary purification. The old world, built on the corpse of a giant and defined by eternal conflict, was fundamentally flawed and unsustainable. Its destruction allows for the emergence of a better, more peaceful existence. The survivors inherit a world of hope, where innocence is restored, old wounds are healed, and life can begin anew, warmed by a new sun and blessed by the hammer of a gentler generation. The cycle is complete, but it is not a perfect circle. It is an upward spiral toward a more harmonious world.
Norse afterlife realms: Valhalla, Helheim, and Folkvanger. What happened after death was a question of profound importance to the Norse people, just as it is to any culture. Their vision of the afterlife, however, was not a simple binary of heaven and hell. Instead, it was a complex and varied landscape of different realms, each with its own ruler, purpose, and criteria for entry. The destination of one's soul was not determined by a universal moral code of good and evil, but rather by the manner of one's death. For the Norse, how you died was everything, and it decided where you would spend eternity. The most famous of these realms are the glorious hall of Valhalla, the gloomy kingdom of Helheim, and the beautiful field of Folkvanger. The most celebrated and aspirational afterlife was Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain. This immense and magnificent hall was located in Asgard and presided over by the god Odin himself. Valhalla was not a place of peaceful, eternal rest. It was a warrior's paradise, a celestial barracks for an eternal army. Its walls were made of shimmering shields, its rafters were spears, and coats of mail were strewn over its benches. It was said to have 540 doors, each wide enough for 800 warriors to march through abreast. This was not for show, it was for the rapid deployment of Odin's army at Ragnarok. However, Valhalla was not the only destination for fallen warriors. Odin did not get to choose all the battle slain. The powerful Vanir goddess Freyja had her own claim. She was the first to choose among the heroic dead, and she took her half to her own realm, Folkvanger, the field of the people, or army field. Her hall within this realm was named Seshrumnir, the Hall of Many Seats. The sagas are less detailed about life in Folkvanger than in Valhalla, but it is described as a beautiful and pleasant place. The fact that Freyja, a goddess of love and fertility as well as war, received half of the slain heroes, suggests a different kind of warrior afterlife, perhaps one that was less singularly focused on the grim preparations for Ragnarok and more balanced. The existence of Folkvanger shows the immense power and status of Freyja, placing her on equal footing with Odin as a ruler of the martial dead. For the vast majority of people who did not die in battle, those who died of old age, sickness, in an accident, or simply were not chosen by Odin or Freyja, the destination was a very different one. Their souls would journey to the grim, subterranean realm of Helheim, often shortened to simply Hel. This was the Norse underworld, located deep within the cold, dark, primordial realm of Niflheim. It was ruled by Loki's daughter, the goddess Hel, a forbidding figure whose half-living, half-dead appearance mirrored the nature of her kingdom. The journey to Hel was a long and arduous one, down a road that sloped ever downwards and to the north. The newly deceased would have to cross the roaring river Gjoll over a bridge paved with glittering gold, the Gjolla Bru. This bridge was guarded by a giantess named Modguth. At the gates of the realm itself stood the monstrous hellhound Garm, his chest forever stained with blood. Helheim itself was not a place of fiery torment or punishment in the Christian sense, at least not for most of its inhabitants. It was primarily described as a gloomy, cold, and shadowy place, a world of mist and dampness from which there was no escape. It was a place of continuation, but without the joy, light, and vigor of life. The souls of the dead, known as shades, would live a leatless, boring existence, a pale imitation of their lives in Midgard. When the god Balder was sent to Helheim, he was received with honor and sat on a high seat, but his new home was still a grim and undesirable one. However, the sagas do mention a specific place of punishment within or near Helheim called Nastrand, the corpse shore, reserved for the worst of sinners, murderers, oath-breakers, and adulterers. Here, they were subject to the endless torment of venom-dripping snakes. These three realms, the glorious barracks of Valhalla, the beautiful field of Folkvanger, and the gloomy kingdom of Helheim, paint a picture of an afterlife intrinsically linked to the values of the living. A glorious death in battle was the highest honor, securing a place among the gods and a role in the final cosmic battle. It was a powerful incentive for a warrior culture. For everyone else, the end was a less glorious but unavoidable descent into the shadows. The Norse afterlife was not about rewarding a lifetime of piety, but about honoring the manner of one's final moments, a testament to the belief that a good death was the ultimate mark of a worthy life.
Norse myth in daily life, rites, festivals, and worship. Norse mythology was not merely a collection of entertaining stories about gods and monsters. For the people of the Viking Age, it was a living, breathing worldview, a spiritual framework that shaped their understanding of the cosmos and their place within it. The myths provided a guide for how to live, how to die, and how to interact with the powerful, often unseen forces that governed their world. This connection between the mythological and the mundane was expressed through a variety of rites, festivals, and acts of worship that were woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. Worship in the Norse world was not typically conducted in large, purpose-built temples like those of the Greeks or Romans. While some evidence suggests the existence of dedicated religious buildings, or god houses, or hofs, much of Norse spiritual practice was more localized and intimate. It often took place in nature, in sacred groves of trees or hurgers, near prominent rocks or by waterfalls, places where the divine presence was felt most strongly. Worship was also a domestic affair, centered on the homestead and led by the head of the family or a local chieftain,
who acted as a priest or godi. The most common form of religious ritual was the blot, which means to strengthen or to worship with sacrifice. A blot was a communal feast and a sacrificial ceremony held to honor the gods or other supernatural beings, like elves or ancestors. The purpose was to win their favor, to thank them for their blessings, or to strengthen them so they could continue to protect the community. The sacrifice often involved an animal, such as a horse, a boar, or an ox. The blood of the sacrificed animal was collected in a ceremonial bowl and sprinkled with a twig or hlauttein onto the altars, the walls of the sacred space, and the participants themselves, consecrating the people and the place. The meat of the sacrificed animal was then boiled in large cauldrons over a fire and shared in a communal feast. This was a crucial part of the ceremony. By eating the sacrifice, the community was sharing a meal with the gods, forging a direct bond between the human and divine worlds. During the feast, horns of ale or mead would be passed around, and toasts would be drunk to specific gods. Typically, a toast would be raised to Odin for victory and wisdom, to Njord and Freyr for a bountiful harvest and peace, and sometimes to Bragi for poetry or to the memory of deceased kings. The blot was both a solemn religious rite and a joyous social occasion, reinforcing the bonds of the community as well as their connection to the gods. The year was marked by several major festivals tied to the turning of the seasons. The most significant of these occurred at the three key points of the year: at the beginning of winter, at midwinter, and at the beginning of summer. The winter festival, known as Veternet, Winter Nights, was held in mid-October and marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year. This was a time to give thanks for the harvest and to make sacrifices for a good winter. It was also a time when the veil between the worlds was considered thin, making it an important time for honoring ancestral spirits and the elves, or Alfablot. The most famous of all Norse festivals was the midwinter celebration of Yule, or Yule. This festival occurred around the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Yule was a multi-day feast filled with drinking, feasting, and sacrifice. It was of great importance, a celebration of the sun's eventual return and the perseverance of life through the darkest time of the year. Many traditions associated with modern Christmas have their roots in Yule customs, such as the Yule log that was burned in the hearth, the feasting on a boar sacred to Freyr, decorating with evergreen plants like holly and mistletoe, and festive drinking. Yule was likely a time to honor all the gods, but particularly Odin in his role as the Yule Father and Freyr for future prosperity. In the spring, a festival known as Sigrblot, victory sacrifice, was held to mark the beginning of summer, the sailing season, and the season for raiding. Sacrifices were made to Odin for victory in the coming expeditions and battles. This festival reaffirmed the martial aspect of the culture, seeking divine favor for the dangerous but potentially profitable ventures that lay ahead. Beyond these major festivals, myth and ritual permeated daily life. Small amulets in the shape of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, were incredibly common, worn by men and women alike for protection, luck, and as a symbol of their faith. These Thor's hammers were the Norse equivalent of the Christian cross, a powerful and personal expression of belief. Runes were not just for writing. They were carved onto tools, ships, and homes for magical protection and good fortune. Life's major transitions were also marked by ritual. Newborn infants were sprinkled with water in a ceremony that acknowledged them as a member of the family, not unlike a christening. Before this, an infant could be legally exposed to the elements and left to die if it was deformed or unwanted. Marriage was a legal contract secured by the exchange of property, but it was also sanctified by feasting and toasts, often invoking Freya, the goddess of love, and Thor, whose hammer was used to hallow the bride. Funerals were of immense importance. The dead were often buried with grave goods, weapons, tools, jewelry, and even sacrificed animals or servants to accompany them to the afterlife. Great chieftains and kings were sometimes given a spectacular ship burial, either interned in a ship beneath a great mound of earth, or more rarely, set adrift on a burning ship, a fiery send-off to the halls of Odin. For the Norse people, the world was alive with mythological significance. A thunderstorm was Thor riding his chariot to fight giants. The rustling of leaves in a sacred grove could be the whisper of a god. Fate, or weird, was a real, tangible force woven by the Norns at the base of Yggdrasil. This worldview ensured that the myths were not distant legends, but an immediate, powerful, and ever-present reality that guided their actions, shaped their values, and gave meaning to their journey through a harsh and unpredictable world.
Loki the trickster, chaos, deceit, and destiny. No figure in Norse mythology is more fascinating, more contradictory, or more pivotal than Loki. He is not a god of the Aesir or the Vanir by blood. He is the son of two giants, Farbauti and Laufey. Yet he was welcomed into Asgard itself and became the blood brother of Odin, the All-Father. He is handsome, charismatic, and silver-tongued, and his cleverness has saved the gods from disaster on numerous occasions. But he is also a shapeshifter, a liar, a thief, and an agent of pure chaos. He is the catalyst for change, the loose thread that will ultimately unravel the entire tapestry of the Norse cosmos. Loki is the trickster, and his story is a complex dance between savior and saboteur. Loki's role in the early days of Asgard is that of a necessary evil, a chaotic problem solver. When the gods need to get out of a self-inflicted bind, it is often Loki's amoral cunning that provides the solution. When a giant master builder tricks the gods into a deal that would cost them the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya, it is Loki who devises a plan. By transforming himself into a beautiful mare, he lures away the builder's magical stallion, Svadilfari, preventing the giant from completing his work on time and voiding the contract. A side effect of this particular trick was that Loki, while in mare form, became pregnant and later gave birth to Sleipnir, the marvelous eight-legged horse that he gifted to Odin. This incident perfectly encapsulates Loki's nature. His solutions are effective, but often bizarre, undignified, and have strange, world-altering consequences. Another time, Loki, in a fit of mischief, shears off the beautiful golden hair of Thor's wife Sif. When the enraged Thor threatens to break every bone in his body, Loki promises to fix the situation. He travels to Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves, and pits two families of master craftsmen against each other in a contest. This scheme results not only in a new head of magical, growing golden hair for Sif, but also in the creation of the greatest treasures of the gods: Odin's spear Gungnir, Freyr's magical ship Skidbladnir, and, most importantly, Thor's hammer Mjolnir. The gods' most powerful assets exist only because of Loki's malicious prank. He is the grit in the oyster that produces the pearl. But for every problem he solves, he creates two more. His nature is not truly to help, but to instigate, to disrupt, and to challenge the established order. There is a darkness in him, a bitterness and jealousy that grows over time. This darkness manifests most horrifically in his children. With the giantess Angrboda, the bringer of grief, Loki fathered three monstrous and terrifying beings destined to play a major role in the world's destruction. The first was the wolf Fenrir, a creature of insatiable hunger and terrifying strength who grew at an alarming rate. The gods, seeing the danger he posed, tried to bind him, but he broke every chain. Only a magical ribbon forged by the dwarves, Gleipnir, could hold him. To trick the wolf into being bound, the god Tyr placed his hand in Fenrir's mouth as a show of good faith. When the wolf realized he was trapped, he bit off Tyr's hand. The gods wedged a sword in Fenrir's jaws to silence his howling and left him bound on a remote island where he awaits Ragnarok, dreaming of his revenge on Odin. The second child was Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. The gods threw this colossal snake into the great ocean that encircles Midgard. There he grew so enormous that he could bite his own tail, surrounding the entire world of men. He lies in the depths, a constant, dormant threat, his rivalry with Thor simmering until their final, fatal encounter. The third child was a daughter named Hel. The gods cast her down into the dark, cold realm of Niflheim and gave her authority over the dead who did not die in battle. Her realm, Helheim, became the Norse underworld. She herself is a grim figure, her body half that of a living woman and half a blue-black corpse, embodying the decay and gloom of her kingdom. These three monstrous children represent Loki's true legacy, the creation of the very forces that will destroy the gods. By fathering them, he sealed Asgard's doom. The turning point in Loki's story, the moment he transforms from a mischievous nuisance to a truly malevolent force, is the death of Baldur. Baldur the Beautiful was the most beloved of all the gods, the son of Odin and Frigg. He was a god of light, purity, and joy. After Baldur was plagued by dreams of his own death, his mother Frigg traveled through the 9 realms and made every single thing, every plant, animal, stone, and disease swear an oath not to harm him. The gods found this amusing, and they made it a sport to throw weapons at Baldur, which would all harmlessly bounce off him. Loki, consumed by jealousy, discovered the one thing Frigg had overlooked: the humble mistletoe, which she had deemed too young and harmless to ask for an oath. Loki fashioned a dart from the mistletoe and gave it to Baldur's blind brother, Höðr, guiding his hand to throw it. The mistletoe pierced Baldur, and he fell down dead. The joy in Asgard turned to silent horror. This was not just a death. It was the first sign that the end times were truly near. It was a murder born of pure malice, and it was unforgivable. When the gods attempted to retrieve Baldur from Helheim, Hel agreed on one condition: that every single thing in the 9 realms weep for him. All of creation wept, except for one giantess in a cave named Thok, who refused. "Let Hel hold what she has," she sneered. It was, of course, Loki in disguise. Baldur was trapped in the underworld forever. For this ultimate act of treachery, the gods' patience finally broke. They hunted Loki down, and after he was captured, they subjected him to a horrific punishment. They bound him to 3 sharp rocks in a cave with the entrails of one of his own sons. Above his head they tied a venomous snake, its fangs dripping poison on his face for all eternity. His loyal wife Sigyn sits by his side, catching the venom in a bowl. But when the bowl is full and she must turn to empty it, the venom strikes Loki's face, causing him to writhe in such agony that the whole earth shakes. This, the Norse believe, is the cause of earthquakes. There Loki lies bound, but not forever. The prophecies say that at the dawn of Ragnarok, his bonds will break. He will be freed, his heart filled with nothing but black hatred for the gods of Asgard. He will captain the ship Naglfar, a horrifying vessel made from the fingernails and toenails of the dead, and he will sail with an army of giants and monsters to the final battle, ready to face the god Heimdall and bring about the twilight of the gods he once lived among. Loki's journey from witty companion to harbinger of doom is the central tragedy of Norse myth, a stark reminder that the greatest threat can often come from within. Norse mythology in the sagas, poetic and prose Edda insights. The knowledge of our grand, complex world of Norse mythology does not come to us from an unbroken ancient tradition. The Viking Age itself left behind no sacred scriptures or holy books. The stories of Odin, Thor, and Ragnarok were part of a vibrant and powerful oral tradition, passed down from one generation to the next by poets and storytellers known as skalds. It wasn't until centuries after the Viking Age had ended, and after Christianity had become the dominant force in Scandinavia, that these ancient tales were finally written down. Our window into this lost world is provided almost entirely by two remarkable medieval Icelandic manuscripts, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. The Poetic Edda, also known as the Elder Edda, is an anonymous collection of mythological and heroic poems compiled in Iceland sometime in the 13th century. These poems are believed to be much older than the manuscript itself, with some dating back to the heart of the Viking Age in the 9th or 10th centuries. They are the raw, unvarnished source material, the closest we can get to the authentic voice of pre-Christian Norse belief. The language is powerful, often cryptic, and deeply evocative. The poems are not straightforward narratives, but are presented as dialogues, prophecies, and collections of wisdom. The crown jewel of the Poetic Edda is the Voluspa, or the Prophecy of the Seeress. This single poem contains the entire mythological arc of the Norse cosmos. In it, the god Odin summons the spirit of a long-dead prophetess, a Volva, and compels her to reveal her knowledge of the past, present, and future. She recounts the creation of the world from the void, the birth of the gods and giants, the golden age of Asgard, the first war and the first murder. She then provides a chillingly detailed blow-by-blow account of Ragnarok, the signs, the battles, the deaths of the gods, before concluding with the vision of the world's rebirth from the sea. The Voluspa is the foundational text, the skeleton key to the entire mythology. Another essential poem is the Havamal, the sayings of the High One. This poem is a collection of proverbs, wisdom, and mystical advice attributed to Odin himself. It offers a fascinating glimpse into the Norse ethical code, emphasizing virtues like hospitality, courage, moderation, self-reliance, and the importance of a good reputation, which is the only thing that lives on after death. The Havamal also contains the powerful first-person account of Odin's sacrifice on Yggdrasil to win the knowledge of the runes and his mastery of magical spells. It paints a portrait of Odin not just as a king, but as a restless seeker of wisdom, a god who understands that power comes from suffering and knowledge. Other poems in the collection focus on specific gods or stories. The Skirnismal tells the tale of Freyr's love-sick quest for the giantess Gerd. The Thrymskiva is a wonderfully comical poem about Thor having to dress up as Freya to retrieve his stolen hammer from the giant Thrym. The Lokasena, or the Loki's Quarrel, is a dramatic poem set at a feast where a drunken Loki systematically insults every god and goddess, revealing their secrets and shames before being chased out, an event that directly precedes his binding. These poems provide the character, the drama, and the personality of the gods. If the Poetic Edda is the primary source, then the Prose Edda is the textbook and the commentary. It was written around the year 1220 by the Icelandic chieftain, poet, and historian Snorri Sturluson. Snorri was a Christian, but he had a deep love and respect for the old pagan traditions, and was concerned that the intricate art of skaldic poetry, which was deeply reliant on mythological knowledge, would be lost. The Prose Edda was written as a manual for aspiring poets, to teach them the myths and the complex kennings, or poetic metaphors, needed to understand and compose in the old style. The Prose Edda is divided into three main parts. The first and most famous is the Gylfaginning, or the deluding of Gylfi. In this section, Snorri creates a clever narrative framework. A legendary Swedish king named Gylfi, curious about the power of the Aesir gods, travels in disguise to Asgard. There he is met by three mysterious figures named High, Just as High, and Third. Gylfi proceeds to ask them questions about their beliefs, from the creation of the cosmos to the final battle of Ragnarok. The The three figures, who are implied to be Odin in three forms, answer their questions by recounting the myths in a clear, systematic, and prose narrative. Snorri essentially organizes the scattered stories from the oral tradition and the poetic Edda into a coherent, chronological story. It is through the Gylfaginning that we have the most detailed accounts of the creation from Ymir's body, the building of Asgard's wall, Thor's journey to Utgard the Loki, and the story of Loki's monstrous children. The second part is the Skaldskaparmal, the language of poetry. Here Snorri continues his instruction, focusing on the specific vocabulary of poetry, particularly the use of kennings or heitir, poetic synonyms. He explains that to be a good poet, one cannot simply say sea. One must use a kenning like whale road. To refer to gold, one could say Fafnir's hoard or Sif's fair. To explain these kennings, Snorri has to tell the myths behind them, and so he recounts the story of the mead of poetry, the dragon Fafnir, and many other tales. It is a treasure trove of mythological anecdotes. The final part is the Hattatal, a demonstration of Snorri's own poetic skill, a poem of praise to a Norwegian king composed in a vast array of different verse forms. Without Snorri Sturluson and the anonymous compiler of the Poetic Edda, our understanding of Norse mythology would be fragmentary at best, pieced together from cryptic runestones and scattered references in heroic sagas. Snorri, the Christian scholar, paradoxically became the single most important figure in the preservation of the pagan faith he did not share. The Eddas are not just historical documents, they are literary masterpieces, providing us with a profound, powerful, and deeply human insight into the worldview of the Norse people, a world of heroic gods, cunning giants, and the ever-present shadow of an inescapable doom. Influence of Norse mythology on modern culture, from Wagner to Marvel. Though the last Viking longships returned to their harbors over 1,000 years ago, and the worship of the Aesir gave way to Christianity, the old gods of the North did not truly die. Their stories, filled with raw power, complex characters, and epic tragedy, lay dormant for centuries in the pages of Icelandic manuscripts before being rediscovered and reborn. In the modern era, Norse mythology has exploded into a global cultural phenomenon. Its themes and characters reinterpreted, reimagined, and powerfully influencing everything from high opera and epic fantasy literature to blockbuster movies and video games. The first major revival of Norse mythology in popular culture came not from Scandinavia, but from Germany. In the mid-19th century, the composer Ragnar Wagner sought to create a new, total work of art, a Gesamtkunstwerk, that would unite music, drama, and poetry to explore deep philosophical themes. He found his perfect source material in the heroic sagas of the Norse. Over a period of 26 years, he composed his monumental four-opera cycle, Der Ring des Nibelungen, The Ring of the Nibelung. While Wagner drew heavily from the Norse Volsunga saga and the Poetic Edda, he was not creating a faithful adaptation. He freely blended Norse and Germanic sources, altered character names, Odin became Wotan, Sigurd became Siegfried, and infused the narrative with his own complex 19th century philosophical concerns about love, power, greed, and the decline of the old gods in the face of human free will. Wagner's Ring Cycle, with its thundering leitmotifs, iconic Ride of the Valkyries, and grand, tragic scale, introduced the world to the immense dramatic potential of Norse myth and cemented its place in the canon of Western high art. In the 20th century, the influence of Norse mythology shifted from the opera house to the pages of fantasy literature, largely through the work of one man, J.R.R. Tolkien. A professor of Anglo-Saxon and Old Norse at Oxford University, Tolkien was steeped in the ancient languages and legends of Northern Europe. His love for this world permeates his entire literary creation, The Lord of the Rings. While not a direct retelling, the echoes are everywhere. The wise, wandering, one-eyed Odin is a clear inspiration for the wizard Gandalf.
Tolkien's dwarves living in their subterranean halls like Moria are heavily based on the dwarven smiths of Svartalfheim. His elves share the grace and nobility of the Norse Alfar, the concept of a world-ending battle, the cursed ring that brings doom to its bearer, and the name Middle-earth itself, a direct translation of Midgard, are all drawn from Norse sources. Tolkien took the spirit, the mood, and the archetypes of Norse mythology and used them to build his own unique and enduring secondary world, setting the stage for the entire modern fantasy genre. This tradition was continued by countless other fantasy authors. Writers like Neil Gaiman, with his novel American Gods, and his direct retelling Norse mythology, brought the gods into the modern world with wit and reverence, repopularizing the original tales for a new generation. The raw, gritty, and fatalistic tone of much of modern grimdark fantasy also owes a debt to the harsh, honor-bound, and doom-laden world of the sagas. Perhaps the most visible and widespread modern interpretation of Norse mythology comes from the world of comic books and cinema, Marvel's Thor. Created by Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby in 1962, the Marvel version of Thor took the core concepts of the mythology and transformed them into a superhero epic. Here, the gods of Asgard are not deities in a religious sense, but superpowered, long-lived extraterrestrials from another dimension. Thor is a clean-shaven, cape-wearing hero, Odin a benevolent but stern king, and Loki a sympathetic, misunderstood villain driven by sibling rivalry. The complex relationships and grim prophecies of the original myths are simplified into classic superhero narratives of good versus evil. When the Marvel Cinematic Universe brought these characters to the big screen, Norse mythology reached an unprecedented level of global popularity. Chris Hemsworth's charismatic Thor and Tom Hiddleston's compelling Loki became household names. While these portrayals are a far cry from the red-bearded giant-slaying Thor and the purely malevolent, chaos-mongering Loki of the Eddas, they have served as a gateway for millions of people to discover the original myths. The films borrow the names, the places, Asgard, Jotunheim, and the artifacts, Mjolnir and the Bifrost, creating a pop-culture-friendly version that captures some of the epic scale, if not the tragic depth of the source material. This influence extends powerfully into the world of video games. The God of War series, after tackling Greek mythology, turned its attention to the Norse pantheon, offering a dark, mature, and visceral interpretation where players control a world-weary Kratos interacting with figures like Baldur, Freya, and Mimir. Critically acclaimed games like The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim are deeply infused with a Norse-inspired aesthetic, from the Viking-like Nords to the dragons and the concept of Sovngarde, a clear homage to Valhalla. Recent titles like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Valheim allow players to directly immerse themselves in a virtual Viking world, exploring the landscapes, cultures, and beliefs of the Norse people. From Wagner's operatic gods to Marvel's cosmic superheroes, from Tolkien's fantasy archetypes to the interactive worlds of video games, Norse mythology has proven to be an incredibly resilient and adaptable wellspring of inspiration. While these modern interpretations often change the details, they tap into the timeless, universal themes that make the original myths so powerful. The struggle between order and chaos, the heroism in the face of certain doom, and the endless cyclical nature of destruction and rebirth. The old gods are very much alive, continuing to shape our modern stories in new and exciting ways.
The legacy of the Norse worldview, fate, honor, and the sacred cycle. Beyond the epic stories and the modern adaptations, what is the lasting legacy of the Norse worldview? What fundamental ideas about life, death, and the nature of the universe did the peoples of the Viking Age leave behind? When we strip away the thunderous battles and the magical artifacts, we find a core philosophy that is both grim and inspiring, a worldview shaped by three powerful and interconnected concepts: the inescapable power of fate, the supreme importance of honor, and the belief in a sacred cycle of destruction and renewal. At the very center of the Norse spiritual landscape is the concept of weird or fate. This was not a simple belief in predestination. It was an active, powerful force, a cosmic web woven by the three Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, at the base of the world tree. The threads of this web determined the lifespan and destiny of every being in the cosmos, from the lowliest human to the All-Father Odin himself. Fate was absolute and immutable. No amount of power, wisdom, or prayer could change the final outcome that the Norns had decreed. This belief had a profound impact on the Norse mindset. If the end is already written, then fear of the future becomes pointless. What matters is not what happens to you, but how you meet it. This fatalism did not lead to passivity, but to a kind of existential courage. The goal was not to avoid one's fate, but to face it head-on, with bravery and dignity. Odin knew he was destined to be devoured by Fenrir at Ragnarok, yet he spent his entire existence preparing for the battle, not to win, but to play his part honorably. The hero Sigurd was warned of the curse on the dragon's gold, but he took it anyway, accepting the tragic destiny that came with it. This acceptance of a predetermined doom is what gives Norse mythology its characteristic tragic grandeur. Flowing directly from this concept of fate is the paramount importance of honor. In a world where you cannot control your ultimate destiny, the only thing you truly have control over is your own actions and your own reputation. A person's honor, their good name, and the memory they left behind were considered the only true form of immortality. The Havamal, the sayings of Odin, puts it succinctly: cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself must also die. But I know one thing that never dies, the reputation of each dead man. This code of honor was the bedrock of Norse society. It dictated that one should be brave in the face of danger, loyal to one's kin and chieftain, generous to friends and guests, and relentless in avenging insults or the death of a family member. To be called a coward or an oath-breaker was the greatest shame. This is why warriors aspired to die in battle and reach Valhalla. It was the most honorable death imaginable, one that guaranteed their story would be told for generations. This focus on honor in the face of a harsh, fatalistic world created a culture of immense resilience, personal responsibility, and a fierce individualistic pride. Your worth was not determined by the gods or by your ultimate fate, but by the courage and integrity with which you lived your life. Finally, the Norse worldview is defined by its cyclical nature. Unlike the linear, one-time apocalypse of some other traditions, Ragnarok is not the final end. It is a necessary and ultimately cleansing part of a grand, repeating cycle. The old world, born of violence from the corpse of Ymir, and forever locked in a state of conflict between gods and giants, was fundamentally flawed. It was destined to collapse under the weight of its own internal contradictions. Its destruction, though terrifying, is a purification. It is the cosmic forest fire that clears away the old dead wood to allow for new, vibrant life to emerge. The vision of the world's rebirth is one of profound hope. A new, green earth rises from the sea. A new, gentler sun warms the sky. A new generation of gods, free from the fatal flaws and ancient grudges of their parents, inherits the world. Balder, the symbol of innocence, is returned,
and his past conflict with Hodr is healed, signifying forgiveness and reconciliation. A new humanity, Leif and Leif-Thrasir, emerges to populate a world of peace and abundance. This belief in a sacred cycle suggests that even the most catastrophic ending is not a true end, but a transition. It is a deeply ecological and philosophical idea that out of death comes life, and out of destruction comes renewal. The legacy of the Norse worldview, therefore, is a powerful and enduring one. It teaches a form of heroic pessimism, an acknowledgement that the world can be a dark and dangerous place, and that doom may be inevitable, but that this is no excuse for despair. It champions the power of the individual to create meaning through their own actions, to build a legacy of honor that can outlive death itself. And it offers the profound comfort that even in the face of total collapse, the universe holds the promise of rebirth. Fate, honor, and the sacred cycle. These three pillars form a philosophy of courage, responsibility, and ultimate hope, a timeless message from the North that continues to resonate with us today, a reminder that the true measure of a life is how bravely we face our own personal Ragnarok.